Chapter 426. Li Mu was taken aback. The Empress could even predict this? He had a sudden thought. Reverend Daoxian was known as the art saint. Among his authentic works, there should at least be a few that were buried with him. As long as they could find his tomb, they would be able to find his authentic works. As the Grand Elder of Corpse Sect, it was normal for him to lead Corpse Sect disciples to rob tombs. Moreover, to the Corpse Sect disciples, there was nothing deeper than robbing tombs together and fighting big dumplings together. In this 1 month, he had shortened the distance between him and the disciples of the Corpse Sect to a great extent, and had also completely gained their trust. However, finding the Art Saint's tomb was far more difficult than Li Mu had imagined. Reverend Daoxian was an ancient from the previous dynasty. He had fallen more than 1,000 years ago. There were very few records about him. With the help of the Corpse Sect disciples, Li Mu spent almost a month to find his tomb. It was also thanks to the Corpse Sect. They were not good at other things, but digging tombs was something that every Corpse Sect disciple was familiar with. In order to steal strong corpses to refine corpses, they had to be proficient in feng shui knowledge. This was very useful for exploring tombs. An outstanding Corpse Sect disciple was definitely an outstanding feng shui master. A skilled feng shui master did not even need to consult ancient books. They only needed to use their eyes to see if there was an ancient tomb in a place. Based on the feng shui of the tomb, they could determine the position or strength of the corpse of Mu Zhong when he was alive. Reverend Daoxian was the last painting master. After him, the art of painting was cut off. In these years, countless people had searched for his tomb. Naturally, there was a lot of information about this. However, after 1,000 years, no one had found it. The Corpse Sect had searched for it before. However, everyone knew that Reverend Daoxian, the art saint, had dismembered himself before he fell. His tomb was only a cenotaph. This, to the Corpse Sect, was naturally boring. Many years ago, they spent a lot of effort, but still could not find his tomb. The Corpse Sect gave up immediately. After all, there were more strong warriors' tombs waiting for them to explore. This time, the members of the Corpse Sect had searched for an entire month. They didn't know how many tombs they had snuck into and investigated before they finally found the tomb of the Art Saint. The dignified Art Saint, a powerhouse of his generation, had actually built his tomb in such a simple and crude manner. Ordinary people would probably think that it was a commoner's tomb. This was also the reason why no one had ever found this tomb in the past 1,000 years. If it wasn't for the fact that Li Mu just happened to have an authentic painting of the painting saint in his possession that produced a subtle connection with the objects buried with the tomb, Li Mu would probably have missed it as well. Looking at the Empress's shocked expression, Li Mu said with a straight face, "I am doing this for the inheritance of the Art Dao. I believe that Senior Art Saint won't blame me. Besides, there are no remains in his tomb, so it isn't considered an offense. All right. Whose paintings does your majesty like? I will send people to dig them up." The people of the Corpse Sect are very good at finding and robbing tombs. Mr. May stood in the middle of the hall with a stunned expression on his face. Damn it. This was clearly a very disappointing matter. Why did it sound so sweet when it came from Limu's mouth? After Zhou came back to her senses, she hurriedly said, "No, no need." Then, she suddenly realized something. Looking at Li Mu, she asked, "Could it be that you weren't at Mount Baiyun this month?" Li Mu still said with some trepidation, "The tomb of the Art Saint is not easy to find. It was just a coincidence that I almost wasted a month of effort. Fortunately, I managed to find it before your majesty's birthday." Zhou was slightly delighted, but her expression was still dignified. She said, "The tomb is full of dangers. Have you forgotten what happened in the White Emperor's cave? Don't do such dangerous things in the future." Li Mu nodded repeatedly. "I will do as you command." Zhou said lightly, "Go to the back hall. Xiao Bai and Wan have been thinking about you all day." Li Mu bowed and said, "I will take my leave now." When Li Mu turned and walked into the back hall, the solemnity on Zhou Yi's face disappeared. She admired the few authentic works of the Art Saint, and the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. Mr. May walked forward and explained, "Your Majesty I didn't tell him your majesty's birthday. He must have heard about it from somewhere else. This rascal, he didn't care about court affairs for a month just to flatter your majesty. He's becoming more and more immature. No wonder people are talking about him behind his back. He nodded deeply and said, keep an eye on him. Don't let him fool around anymore. Mr. May raised his head and looked at the Empress. Even his eyes were smiling. He could only say helplessly, I know. In the back hall of Changle Palace, Li Mu hugged Xiao Bai and spun around. He gave Wanwan the same treatment. Wanwan hugged his arm and looked at him pitifully. She said, Sir, next time, wherever you go, can you bring us along? If Li Mu was going to play, of course, he would bring them along. But this time, he was going to dig up graves. How could he bring two delicate little girls along? But looking at Wanwan's eyes, he couldn't say no. He could only say, okay, I promise you. In the future, if I can bring you along, I'll try my best. I haven't seen you for a month. Let me check your cultivation first. Wanwan raised her head and said proudly, I am already at the 4th realm. Although Wanwan's talent was average, she had the Empress's support and had endless cultivation resources. In addition, with the Empress's guidance, her cultivation had already reached the theurgy level at a young age. Because of Lingtong, her strength was far beyond the theurgy level. If ordinary creation realm cultivators didn't pay attention, they would also be bewitched by her. Xiao Bai's talent wasn't low. Before Li Mu left, she had already advanced to the 5-tailed realm. In this month, her cultivation didn't improve at all. Firstly, she was like Li Mu. Her cultivation was forcefully raised. If she didn't accumulate enough, it would be very difficult for her cultivation to improve. Unless she encountered a great opportunity, it would be very difficult for her to improve in a short time. Under normal circumstances, the Fox clan needed decades to advance from the 5-tailed realm to the 6-tailed realm. And 99% of the 5-tailed foxes would never be able to cross this hurdle in their lifetime. Now, Xiao Bai wasn't just facing the problem of stagnation in her cultivation. She still lacked the cultivation method after the 5-tailed realm. Xiao Bai's grandmother only had the cultivation method of the Fox clan before the 5th realm. If she wasn't of the Fox clan, Li Mu, who had the Demon clan's heavenly book, could provide her with the cultivation method from the 5th realm to the 9th realm. However, the Fox clan's cultivation method was independent of the Demon clan. Li Mu couldn't provide her with any help. Li Mu wasn't the only one who couldn't. The Empress couldn't either. The Fox clan's cultivation method was only passed down to the Fox clan unless they found a 5th realm fox demon. Li Mu knew a 5th realm fox demon, and she owed him a favor. In principle, Li Mu could ask for her favor and pave the way for Xiao Bai's cultivation. However, Phantom Princess was his enemy. It was very likely that he didn't ask for her favor and would end up losing his own life. Moreover, this wasn't a long-term solution. Even if he had the cultivation method for the 5th realm, he still didn't know anything about the 6th realm. When Xiao Bai's cultivation level increased, she would encounter the same problem. Actually, there was another way. That was to let Xiao Bai cultivate the ordinary demon Dao. She was already at the 5th realm and had already surpassed consciousness opening, fetus molding, and transfiguration. She only needed 1 or 2 years to condense a demon core. However, this way, her identity as a Fox clan member would be wasted. Even if her cultivation level increased, her mantissa wouldn't increase, and she wouldn't have the Fox clan's talent. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Li Mu wouldn't let her take this path. If she could obtain the Fox clan's heavenly book from the Illusion Lord, Xiao Bai's cultivation would be smooth sailing. However, it wasn't easy to steal a treasure from a fox's mouth. He could only find another opportunity in the future. Li Mu stroked Xiao Bai's head and said, Don't worry. I'll find the cultivation method for you after the 5th realm as soon as possible. After accompanying Xiao Bai and Wanwan for a while, they went to play by themselves. Li Mu stayed in the room alone. He stretched out his hand, and a brush appeared in his hand. This brush was found by Li Mu in the painting Sage's Cenotaph. This brush was identical to the brush used by the old man at the bow of the boat in the painting. It was likely an item belonging to the painting sage. However, Li Mu couldn't create something out of nothing with this brush. This meant that the profundity of this art lay in the caster and not the brush. This was a large part of the reason why the painting Tao was cut off. Be it the Buddhist Tao, the demonic Tao, or the ghost Tao, it was very easy to gain a rudimentary understanding of cultivation. All one needed to do was cultivate step by step. Therefore, they were able to endure for so long. For artists and musicians, to gain a rudimentary understanding of their arts, one had to have superb artistic attainments. Just this alone was enough to keep most people at bay. Without anyone cultivating it, it wasn't surprising that the heritage was cut off. However, no matter how difficult this path was, Li Mu had to give it a try. The painting sage's divine power of painting in the void gave Li Mu a great deal of inspiration. The painting Tao could create something out of nothing. If he used the same method to draw talismans, wouldn't he be able to save talisman materials and condense talismans in the void? Li Mu thought about it carefully and felt that this idea was very feasible. If he wanted to cultivate the painting Tao, he had to start by learning how to draw. This was also the first time Li Mu realized that he didn't have any artistic talent. With his cultivation, he could control every muscle in his body, including his hands. However, drawing required more than just the control of the body. It was the same landscape painting, but Li Mu had imitated Dao Xian's authentic work. On the surface, there was not much difference between the two paintings, but when one compared them, one would have to wonder what exactly he had painted in the room. Li Mu looked at a new painting on the table and frowned. The Empress walked in from outside and asked, "What are you doing?" Li Mu said, "Your Majesty, can you help me take a look and see what's wrong with this painting of mine? It has form but no spirit. You haven't gained a rudimentary understanding of it." Zhou, he glanced at it and said lightly. She then asked, "You want to learn to draw?" Li Mu nodded and said, "It seems that I can't just draw blindly. I have to find someone to guide me." "Who should I find?" The Empress looked at the painting and coughed lightly. Li Mu suddenly looked at the Empress, and his eyes lit up. He was really stupid. The person who could teach him how to draw was so close and so far away. He looked at the Empress and said, "The painting skills of the painters in the palace are definitely not bad. Can I have them teach me how to draw?" Chapter 427. In the back hall of Changle Palace, Zhou Yi fell silent after hearing Li Mu's words. Li Mu saw that she didn't answer for a long time and couldn't help but ask, "Your Majesty, can I?" Zhou Yi glanced at him and said lightly, "Yes, but there are many rules for painters in the palace. Even if you want to learn, they may not be willing to teach you. If they don't want to, I can't force them." Li Mu nodded and said, "Of course. If they don't want to, I can only find someone else." Zhou Yi walked to the front hall and glanced at Mr. Mei. She said, "Mei Wei, go to the secretary department and find a painter to teach Li Mu how to paint. Say it's under my orders." Mr. Mei bowed and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." Zhou Yi added, "If the painter doesn't want to, don't force him." Mr. Mei looked up at her and met her eyes. He nodded and said, "I understand." Li Mu wanted to choose his own teacher. He walked to Mr. Mei and said, "I'll go with you. You stay." Zhou Qiong glanced at him and said in an unquestionable tone, "As an official of the imperial court, you left your post without my permission for more than a month. I haven't punished you yet. You stand here for 15 minutes and reflect." "Yes, Your Majesty." Li Mu sighed and obediently stood where he was. Although he had wanted to give the Empress a surprise, and, at the same time, try to find an inheritance of the art Tao, he had also violated the rules of the imperial court and should be punished. Moreover, he wasn't a primary school student. Standing for 15 minutes wasn't a punishment at all. Li Mu stood in the hall. "Zhou, you didn't sit down." She walked to him and said, "In addition, without my permission, you're not allowed to dig people's graves. If there's a next time, it won't be as simple as standing." Li Mu said sincerely, "I know my mistake. No matter what, entering someone else's tomb was always immoral. Moreover, it was disrespectful to the dead. He was not Thousand Illusions and did not really like this. With the Empress's permission, for example, entering the White Emperor Cave and getting the page of the Tomes of Arcane was a reasonable archaeological excavation. Or, For the sake of passing down the painting doctrine, visiting the tomb of the painting saint from 1,000 years ago was justifiable. In order to unravel the mysteries of the ancient era and explore the ancient history, it was not only the demonic Tao, but also the righteous Tao cultivators. If there were similar situations in the future, he could just apply to her first. In Changle Palace, Li Mu stood obediently as punishment. In the Secretary Province, Mr. May had already summoned 3 court painters. Although their cultivations weren't high, they were all existences standing at the pinnacle of Great Zhou's painting and calligraphy world. They represented the pinnacle of Great Zhou's art. An old man bowed and asked, "What orders do you have, sir?" Lord May said indifferently, "You are the most experienced and skilled painters in the palace. Li Mu, the Imperial Secretariat's official, is currently learning how to paint. He wants to find one of you to teach him." The white-haired old man stepped forward and said, "I admire Sir Li's actions very much. I'm willing to use all my life's knowledge to teach Sir Li painting skills." The other middle-aged man didn't dare to show weakness and said, "It's my honor to teach Sir Li. I'm also willing to teach him all my painting skills." The last young man said, "If Sir Li is interested in painting women, you can come to me at any time." Mr. May glanced at them and asked, "Your painting skills can't be easily taught to outsiders, so no one will teach him. Understand?" The old man was puzzled and asked why. The middle-aged man was surprised and said, "Our master didn't set such a rule." The young man was puzzled and asked, "Why is that?" Mr. May said coldly, "You don't have to ask why. If Li Mu asks, just say so. If anyone wants to teach him, they don't have to come tomorrow." The 3 men's expressions became serious, and they immediately spoke. "Yes, sir." "Understood." "Understood." After Lord May left, the 3 of them looked at each other with puzzled expressions. One moment he's allowed to teach, the next moment he's not. Is he going to teach or not? Of course not. Didn't you hear what Commander May said at the end? Whoever dares to teach him can pack up and go home tomorrow. Let's listen to Commander May. She's by His Majesty's side. Her wishes are His Majesty's wishes. We can't go against his orders. If he wants to teach, then teach. If he doesn't want to teach, then don't teach. What is His Majesty playing at? Oh, right, I remember that His Majesty also likes painting. The Art Saint's original work is in His Majesty's hands. If he doesn't want us to teach him, does His Majesty want to teach him himself? Shoo, be careful with your words. Changle Palace. Li Mu had been standing there for 15 minutes. He was eating the grapes given by the Empress while waiting for Mr. May to return. Li Mu was quite confident about this matter. Although many people in Fairy's capital didn't like him, there were even more people who liked him. He wasn't loved by everyone, but with his status, it shouldn't be a problem to hire a few court painters to teach him painting. Moreover, the Empress had given him a verbal order not to force them. It was just a casual remark. Everyone knew that the Empress favored him the most. If anyone dared to refuse, they wouldn't have to come to work tomorrow. Soon, footsteps could be heard outside Changle Palace. Mr. May walked in and bowed. "Your Majesty, none of the 3 painters are willing to teach him." Li Mu was stunned. Then he asked in disbelief why. Lord May explained, "They said that their painting skills are not taught to outsiders, so they can't teach you." Zhou glanced at Li Mu and said calmly, "Since they have such a rule, I can't force them. You'd better find someone else." Li Mu couldn't accept this fact. He personally went to the Secretary Province and found the 3 painters. The old man said apologetically, "Lord Li, I'm really sorry. Please forgive me for not being able to help you. I once swore to the heavens that I wouldn't teach my painting skills to anyone else. Otherwise, I'd be struck by lightning and die a horrible death." Li Mu looked at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man immediately said, "Same for me." The young man also immediately said, "Same for me." Li Mu shook his head and said disappointedly, "I finally know why the art of painting was cut off. If the painters in the past were like you, it would be strange if the art of painting didn't change." Li Mu had been curious before. Taoism was easy to get started with, and it was easy to get started with it. Furthermore, it was open to the public and did not hide anything. It served them right to flourish. Even if it was harder to learn the art of painting, Could it be harder than legalism? Nowadays, legalism still appeared often, but there were no painters. This might be the reason. However, Li Mu couldn't force others to follow this rule. At most, he could only lament their misfortune and be angry at their incompetence. After returning from the Secretary Province, Mr. May suddenly said, "Why don't you let Her Majesty teach you?" Li Mu was stunned. He asked, "Does Her Majesty know how to paint?" Mr. May rolled his eyes and said, "Why do you think Her Majesty likes to collect the works of the art saint? Her Majesty has liked to paint since she was young. Her painting skills are comparable to the top painters in the palace." Li Mu knew that the Empress liked to play with flowers and plants. He had known her for so long, but he had never seen her paint. However, there was no need for Sir May to lie to him about such things. How could a person who didn't know anything about painting like a painting be his favorite thing? Moreover, when the Empress had commented on his painting, she had seemed to be quite professional. Li Mu sighed softly. He felt like he had searched for her thousands of times in the crowd, but when he looked back, she was in the dim light. It was just that the light was too dazzling, and Li Mu didn't notice it for a moment. It turned out that the Empress was the person he had been looking for. Changle Palace. Wanwan looked at the table full of dishes and said in surprise, "What's the occasion today? Why are there so many dishes?" Xiaobai looked and said, "They all seem to be Sister Zhou's favorite." Wanwan said, "I like them too." Xiaobai muttered, "As long as it's edible, you like it." Li Mu patted their heads and said, "Today is your sister Zhou's birthday." Every dish on the table was made by Li Mu himself, and they were all the Empress's favorites. He hadn't made so many dishes for a long time. This time, he had to be more attentive since he had a favor to ask. After eating and drinking, the two lively girls went out to digest. Li Mu looked at the Empress and asked with a smile, "Are these dishes to your liking, Your Majesty?" Zhou nodded and said, "Yes, you are very considerate." Li Mu struck while the iron was hot and said, "Your Majesty, I have a presumptuous request." Zhou said indifferently, "What is it? Say it." Li Mu raised his head and said, "Mr. May said that Your Majesty's painting skills are unparalleled. I would like to ask Your Majesty to teach me how to paint." Zhou thought for a moment and said, "For the sake of these dishes, I agree. Mei Wei, prepare the brush and ink." Chapter 428. In Changle Palace, Li Mu quietly watched the Empress paint. At this moment, the Empress was the most serious, just like when she was trimming the flowers and plants. She painted the same landscape as Li Mu and used the same brush and ink as Li Mu. The mountains and water in the painting were lively and lively, unlike the empty mountains and stagnant waters in Li Mu's painting. What depressed Li Mu the most was that the two paintings looked similar at first glance, but when he felt it carefully, there was a world of difference. After finishing the last stroke, the Empress put down the brush and said softly, "The art saint once said that there are 3 realms in painting. Painting the mountain is a mountain. Painting the water is water. Painting the mountain is not a mountain. Painting the water is not water. Painting the mountain is still a mountain. Painting the water is still water. You have only just entered the first realm. You can barely draw the shape of the mountains and rivers, but you can't draw the meaning of the mountains and rivers." Li Mu asked, "How can I draw the meaning of the mountains and rivers?" The Empress said leisurely, "See more and paint more. When you have enough experience, you will naturally be able to draw the meaning of the mountains and rivers. I will teach you the basic techniques first. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask me." Li Mu asked again, "How long will it take for me to reach the second realm?" Zhou said indifferently, "At least 2 to 3 years, at most 20 to 30 years. It depends on your comprehension. The improvement of one's painting skills couldn't be achieved in a day." Li Mu could only learn slowly from the Empress. The Empress would give Li Mu pointers every day. Other than the basic practice, Li Mu would also immerse himself in the art saint's authentic works and seriously comprehend them. He would improve a lot every day. These days, what surprised Li Mu was that the Empress was actually so artistic. In the past, Li Mu's understanding of her was limited to the fact that she was beautiful, a cultivation genius, a 7th realm elite, a petty and simple queen who liked to play with flowers and plants, and a sweet and naive one. If the Empress hadn't mentioned it, Li Mu wouldn't have known that she was also a master painter. Later on, he found out that before he entered the palace, Zhou Yi of the Zhou clan was famous in the divine capital for his talent in cultivation and his attainments in painting. Li Mu had been with the Empress for a long time. Based on his understanding of her, when Zhou Qian was a young girl, she probably only wanted to have her own flower garden in the future so that she could plant flowers and paint when she was in the mood. But after she became an adult, these things became more and more distant from her. Mr. Mei and Li Mu walked in the palace. She let out a sigh of relief and smiled. Ever since you came to the palace, everything has changed. In the past, the emperor could only go to the royal garden after morning court. He had no time to paint. Sometimes when I patrolled late at night, I could still see the emperor sitting on the roof. Li Mu rolled his eyes at her and said, "Isn't it because the things that should have been done by His Majesty have been done by me these days? Otherwise, His Majesty wouldn't have so much free time." Mr. Mei smiled and said, "That's why. If only you had entered the palace 3 years earlier. If you had entered the palace 3 years earlier, the emperor wouldn't have had to suffer these 3 years. 3 years ago, Li Mu wasn't Li Mu yet, so such a possibility didn't exist. For the current Li Mu, if he had to deal with memorials every day, he would also be annoyed. It was better to help the Empress complete her great cause and then live in seclusion in the fields, planting vegetables and flowers." In the past year, the faith of the people in the 36 counties of the Great Zhou had almost doubled compared to a few years ago. In terms of governance, the only emperor in the history of the Great Zhou who could compare to the Empress was Emperor Wen. If the current policy was maintained and the people were allowed to recuperate for 10 years, surpassing Emperor Wen wouldn't be difficult. In these 10 years, the faith of the people in the Great Zhou would gradually stabilize and wouldn't increase too much. In this way, the nurturing of the emperor's qi would be far away in the future. To accelerate the nurturing of the emperor's qi and allow the empress to be liberated sooner, the only way was to greatly increase the faith of the people in the counties. Once the faith of the people had stabilized, internal factors alone wouldn't be able to stimulate the people. At this time, some external stimulation would be needed. For example, subduing the Yao kingdom and the ghost realm, eliminating the demon sect, or unifying the Zhou province. These things could greatly stimulate the people of the Great Zhou and make their support for the Empress reach a peak. Naturally, there was no need to worry about the faith of the people. However, none of these things were easy to accomplish. On the contrary, it was easy to waste all the previous efforts. Once the Yao kingdom or the ghost realm invaded, or the demon sect wreaked havoc in the counties, causing the Great Zhou to be in turmoil, all the efforts he and the Empress had put in over the past year would be wasted. Of course, the Great Zhou could still keep these forces in check at the moment. The only trouble was the southern countries. For a long time, the southern countries were vassals of the Great Zhou. Every year, they paid tribute. The Great Zhou provided protection for them. At that time, the Great Zhou was undoubtedly the overlord of the Zhou continent. However, the success of 2 incapable emperors caused the Great Zhou's national strength to rapidly decline within a few decades. It also caused the vassal countries in the south to have disloyalty. In these few decades, the tributes from the various countries went from once a year to once every 2 years, once every 3 years, and once every 5 years until the end of the previous emperor's reign. Now, the Shao royal family had even lost control of the Great Zhou. Such a large empire had fallen into the hands of a woman. The thoughts of the various countries became more active. This time, the ambassadors of the various countries took advantage of the tributes and gathered in Shundu. They had already communicated with each other. It seemed that they had reached some kind of tacit agreement to completely break away from the Great Zhou and cancel the tributes. Although this didn't cause any substantial losses to the Great Zhou, it was a huge blow to the hearts of the people. The Great Zhou used to be the Celestial Empire. The surrounding countries all submitted to it. If the various countries broke away from the Great Zhou while the Empress was on the throne, it would be a great sin that the Empress couldn't make up for with any achievements. Although this was a mess left behind by the previous two emperors of the Great Zhou, they were already dead. The people would only blame the empress. Li Mu pondered for a moment. He looked at Mr. Mei and asked, "Is it true that the various countries want to break away from the Great Zhou?" Speaking of this, Mr. Mei's expression became serious. He nodded and said, "It is true. In these few decades, the various countries have become more and more dissatisfied with the Great Zhou. The last time the various countries paid tribute, because of the previous emperor's incompetence, caused the imperial court to lose face in front of the ambassadors of the various countries. It also caused them to become disloyal. In these 5 years, from the passing of the previous emperor to the Zhou family seizing the emperor's qi and the ascension of the empress, the Great Zhou has been in turmoil. Their ambitions can't be hidden anymore," Li Mu said calmly. "This is normal. Who wants to be a vassal of others forever? To them, they probably want the Great Zhou to be destroyed. They want to take advantage of the chaos to carve up the Great Zhou," Mr. Mei said angrily. "A bunch of immature wolves. They probably forgot who helped them defend against the enemies of Yanzhou and Changzhou. Without the Great Zhou, they would have been swallowed up by others long ago. Not even dregs are left." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Calm down. Times have changed. It is no longer the time of the previous emperor. Even if they really have disloyalty, I'm afraid they don't have the guts." Honglu Temple, the residence of the various countries' ambassadors. In a courtyard, a middle-aged man in a long robe and a young man beside him stood quietly in the courtyard. Their gazes were looking in the direction of the imperial palace. Their eyes shone with a golden light. At the end of their line of sight, a certain part of the sky was shining with golden light. It didn't take long for the golden light in their eyes to disappear. That part of the sky also returned to its original color. The young man asked doubtfully, "Didn't Sir say that the Great Zhou's destiny has come to an end, and that the common people are disloyal to the court? Why is there still so much psychokinesis in the Great Zhou ancestral temple?" The middle-aged man said in a deep voice, "The Great Zhou of today is no longer the Great Zhou of the past. I originally thought that the Great Zhou replacing the Shao family was the last bit of destiny for the Great Zhou. I didn't expect that in just 5 years, no, in just 1 year, the Great Zhou would return to its 100-year-old peak." The young man asked, "Then do we still want to leave the Great Zhou?" The middle-aged man said softly, "Let's wait and see first." A strange light flashed in his eyes. He said meaningfully, "Li Mu." A rueful look appeared in the young man's eyes. He said, "That Li Mu is truly formidable. He actually has the ability to change the destiny of a country. If my great Yong also had such a character, the national strength would definitely be even more prosperous. In 100 years, we might be able to unify the ancestral province." In the Changle Palace, the corners of Zhou Yi's mouth curled up. He said disdainfully, "In your dreams," Li Mu, who was in the middle of painting, raised his head. He asked doubtfully, "What did your Imperial Majesty just say?" Zhou Yi's expression returned to normal. He said, "Nothing. Continue painting. Don't get distracted." Chapter 429. In the Changle Palace, Li Mu was painting seriously. These days, he gradually felt that it was not a bad thing that the painters in the palace were not willing to teach him. The Empress's attainments in painting were extremely high, and when she taught him, she was gentle and responsible. In just 2 days, Li Mu had already forgotten all about being a court painter and was wholeheartedly focused on learning from the Empress. Zhou Yi stood beside Li Mu. As she looked, she said, "In painting, there is no need to stick to the appearance. You have to use the appearance to write the spirit. You have to search for the feeling between resemblance and non-resemblance." Li Mu carefully pondered her words. After a while, the Empress sat back on the dragon throne and said softly, "Later today, the imperial court will invite the ambassadors of the various countries to a banquet in the Chiyang Hall. You will go with the officials of the Secretariat." Great Zhou was the sovereign state. Every time they paid tribute, they would invite the ambassadors of the various countries. At that time, besides the important officials of the imperial court, the Empress would also attend. After finishing this painting, Li Mu went to the secretariat. Today's banquet was only for officials of the 4th rank and above. In the secretariat, only the head of the secretariat and 2 assistant ministers were qualified. Li Mu had just returned to the duty room when Lu Yi walked in and asked, "Will Lord Li also attend today's banquet?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Her Majesty has asked me to go with the officials of the secretariat." Although Li Mu's rank was not high enough, it was within Lu Yi's expectations that he would go. He smiled and said, "In that case, I will call Lord Li again later." There is still some time before the banquet, so Li Mu had nothing to do. He stretched out his hand. With a flash of white light, the art saint's brush appeared in his hand. He gripped the brush and attempted to draw a few strokes in the void, yet nothing was left behind. Li Mu had the Empress try before, and she was also unable to use the ultimate art of creating something from nothing of the painting path. It was fine if Li Mu couldn't do it, but even the Empress couldn't. Li Mu had reason to suspect that this technique was the same as Dao techniques and mystical powers. It should also require a chant or an incantation. Unfortunately, the tomb of the art saint was very simple. Other than this brush and a few authentic works, there was nothing else. On the Dao of painting, Li Mu encountered the same predicament as Xiao Bai. They both lacked cultivation dermic formulations. Xiao Bai's predicament was easy to resolve. The white fox race was still a large fey race, but the Dao of painting had not appeared for a long time. At present, the only thing Li Mu could do was to learn painting from the Empress and wait for the right opportunity. Half an hour later, Li Mu, Lu Yi, and the others walked towards the Chuyang Hall. This hall was to the left of the Crepe Myrtle Hall. During the time of the previous emperor, he often held banquets for officials and clans. Walking into the Chuyang Hall, Li Mu walked to his seat and sat down, looking across. At this banquet, the officials of the Great Zhou sat on the left, and the ambassadors of the various countries sat on the right. Across from Li Mu were the ambassadors of the various countries. There were more than 10 small countries in the southeast and southwest of Zhou province. The combined area of these small countries was only half the size of Great Zhou. In these 100 years, they were all vassals of Great Zhou. They paid tribute to Great Zhou, and Great Zhou provided them with protection. Other than this relationship, Great Zhou would not interfere with their internal affairs. Among these countries, Liang, Yu, Jiang, Jing, Shun, and Yong were the most powerful. Among the 6 Taoist sects, other than the Fulu School and Xuanzong, which were located in Great Zhou, the other 4 sects were located in Liang, Yu, Jiang, and Jing. Relying on these 4 sects, these 4 countries had considerable influence in the south. Although Shan did not have a Taoist sect, it was the birthplace of Buddhism. Among the various countries, it had the largest area and the largest population. Its strength could not be underestimated. In the past, Shun was a formidable rival of Great Zhou. When Great Zhou was first established, Shin took advantage of the Great Zhou's instability to provoke Great Zhou. Taizu sent troops to attack Shin's capital. If it were not for Great Zhou's policy of peace, Shun would have long been erased from the Zhou continent. Since then, Shun Guo had been completely well-behaved. For a long time, Shun had the ambition to become the overlord of the Zhou continent. However, due to the existence of Great Zhou, they could only settle for second place. Even so, they never extinguished their desire to dominate. Although Yong did not have any powerful sects, Yong's imperial family was extremely powerful. They had more than one expert of the upper realm, far surpassing the Great Zhou's Shao clan. What was even rarer was that as Great Zhou's emperors grew more and more muddle-headed with each generation, Yong produced 5 generations of wise emperors. They worked hard for 100 years, sweeping away all obstacles within the country and completing the peaceful unification of the country. During these 100 years, Yong's national strength steadily increased. In Zhuzhou, it was the 3rd most powerful country, second only to Great Zhou and Shun. In the beginning, the other countries were very submissive to Great Zhou, practically kneeling and begging. They wanted to use their tributes in exchange for Great Zhou's protection. Without Great Zhou, They would have to face enemies from other continents. However, following the decline of Great Zhou, their thoughts naturally changed. They began to look forward to Great Zhou's destruction and its replacement as the new overlord of the Zhou continent. However, the previous emperor's muddle-headedness had caused Great Zhou to sink into a quagmire. Coincidentally, the Great Zhou had rebelled and seized power, causing Great Zhou to become even more chaotic. The other countries' thoughts were bound to become even more active. This tribute had to intimidate these people enough. Otherwise, Great Zhou would lose its right to speak on the Zhou continent and its prestige as a great country. While Limu was observing the various countries' envoys, a man seated across from him, wearing clothes different from those of Great Zhou, called over the eunuch behind him and asked in a low voice, "Who is Lord Limu of your esteemed country?" The eunuch looked across, his gaze searching, replying to the envoy, "Starting from the table directly across from you. The third person on the left is Lord Limu." The man, as well as the several people at the two tables beside him, looked over at the same time, their hearts trembling. "He's that Limu. He's so young. Great Zhou has changed too much in the past few years. This person is so young, but his methods are so powerful." Everyone had been in Luoyang for several days and was no stranger to Limu's name. On the first day they arrived in Luoyang, they had heard of his name in the ears of the common people. At first, they were curious, but after some investigation, they were only left with shock. Abolishing the criminal substitution law, reforming the recruitment of officials, cleaning up the academy's court, attacking the old and new parties, and taking back power to the Empress of Great Zhou. Everything he did was earth-shattering. Who didn't know about the criminal substitution law of Great Zhou? This law separated the common people from the nobles. Although it was convenient for the nobles and officials, it was a nightmare for the poor common people. Ever since this law was promulgated, the faith of the people of Great Zhou decreased year by year. The various countries saw this and were happy in their hearts. The emperor of Great Zhou was so muddle-headed, and the court was so decadent. It would be best if the various counties of Great Zhou rose up in revolt and rebelled against the court. This would also give them an opportunity to take advantage of and divide up Great Zhou. From then on, they would no longer have to submit to others. However, in the past 5 years, this law had been abolished. Limu had also used a few cases to trick the previous emperor into giving away the death exemption golden medallion. From then on, the nobles who broke the law would be punished the same as the common people. After these things, the people of Great Zhou began to unite again. In addition, Limu had also proposed the imperial examination, breaking the academy's dictatorship. He had recruited talents from the local areas and once again united the people's hearts. This was far from enough. In the past few years, the court of Great Zhou had been firmly controlled by the old and new parties. It had been in a state of internal friction. However, in the past 2 years, it had been attacked by Limu at the same time, greatly strengthening the centralization of power of the Empress of Great Zhou. In the past 5 years, earth-shattering things had happened in Great Zhou. Outsiders had seized power, and the country had changed owners. The various countries thought that the opportunity they had been waiting for 100 years had come. They were about to take advantage of this tribute to renegotiate terms with the Great Zhou. However, after arriving at Luoyang, everything here made them dumbfounded. There were no common people living in the abyss of suffering, nor was there an imperial court that was about to collapse. Great Zhou was still the powerful Great Zhou. They cleaned up the Great Zhou internally and reformed the evil laws. They were also extremely strong externally. Even the powerful demon path had suffered a lot at their hands. They were silent for a while, and this completely disrupted their plans. And all of this was because of the man opposite them. He had saved a building from collapse. He was deeply trusted by the people of Great Zhou. He was the most favored official of the Empress of Great Zhou. He was Limu of the Secretariat. In the eyes of the crowd, there was pity, admiration, and resentment. They regretted that they had lost the opportunity they had waited so long for. They admired Limu's actions. putting aside their standpoints. What he had done was worthy of everyone's admiration. It was normal for them to feel resentment. Because of this person's existence, their many years of anticipation had gone up in smoke. How could they not hate him? Soon, the expressions of the two envoys from the Shen nation, who had hidden resentment in their eyes, changed. Their emotions and strength were actually being sucked away by someone through the air. The two of them immediately guarded their hearts and minds, and only then did they manage to guard the power of their emotions. In a great hall, several gazes swept over Li Mu. The calm secretary of the Secretariat revealed a meaningful smile on his face. Li Mu tilted his head slightly and asked Lu Yi, who was beside him, "Lord Lu, which country are the two people wearing hats opposite us from?" Lu Yi looked up and said, "They are the envoys from the Shen nation." Li Mu understood and said, "As expected, they are from the Shen nation. Among the countries in the Zhou continent, the Shen nation was the one that refused to accept the Great Zhou the most. For a long time, the Shen nation regarded itself as the overlord of the Zhou continent. Their self-confidence was extremely inflated. They wanted to bully the Great Zhou that had just been established, and its foundation was not very stable. Instead, they were attacked by the Great Zhou near their capital and were almost destroyed. Only then did they become well-behaved and pay tribute every year to show their allegiance. In these years, although the Shen nation had not developed much, the Great Zhou had been declining. If one were to say who in the Zhou continent wanted the Great Zhou to collapse and disappear, it would undoubtedly be the Shen nation. Lu Yi's mouth twitched and said, "The Shen nation has always wanted to see us make a fool of ourselves. This time, I'm afraid they will be disappointed." The Shen nation's envoy had suffered a hidden loss at the hands of Li Mu, but he did not dare to act up. After glaring angrily at Li Mu, he looked away. As the banquet began, the gazes on Li Mu gradually decreased. However, Li Mu noticed that a gaze diagonally to his left was always on him. Li Mu followed the gaze and saw a young man hurriedly look away. Li Mu casually asked Lu, "Which country is that young man from?" Lu Yi looked and said, "He should be from the Yong Kingdom." The Yong Kingdom was not large, but its strength was not weak. This was especially true for the Yong royal family, which was the most powerful in the Zhou continent. In terms of a number of experts in the upper realm, the Yong Kingdom was comparable to the 6 schools and 4 sects. The Yong Kingdom had produced 5 wise rulers in succession and could be considered a legend in the Zhou continent. Li Mu's gaze swept past the young man and looked at the middle-aged man beside him. The man's aura was concealed and not a trace was leaked. He looked like a mortal who had never cultivated. However, the Yong Kingdom would not send a mortal. Even if his cultivation had not reached the 7th realm, it should be very close. Li Mu's gaze quickly returned to the young man. It was not because he was handsome, but because although he was no longer looking at Li Mu, he had begun to steal glances at the Empress. From time to time, his gaze would glance at the curtains in front of him. When he noticed that Li Mu was looking at him, he immediately lowered his head and focused on the food on the table in front of him. The young man discovered that every time he tried to steal a glance at the legendary figure of the Zhou continent behind the curtains, a gaze would fall on him. After a few times, he no longer dared to steal another glance. The atmosphere at the banquet was exceptionally harmonious. None of the envoys from the various countries proposed to leave the Great Zhou and stop paying tribute. They had already reached an agreement on this matter. However, what they had seen and heard in the Great Zhou over the past few days forced them to be cautious. When the banquet was about to end, Mr. Mei walked in from outside and hurried behind the curtains. He seemed to have something urgent to attend to. Li Mu noticed that an envoy from the Shen Kingdom sitting opposite him seemed to have received some kind of message. His expression slowly darkened. He left his seat and walked to the center of the hall. In a deep voice, he said, "Your Majesty, I have just learned that a citizen of my country has been killed in your country. You must give us a satisfactory explanation for this matter. Otherwise, the Shen Kingdom will no longer pay tribute to the Great Zhou Empire." When the courtiers in the hall heard this, they were immediately in an uproar. Even if it was an ordinary case of murder, They could not afford to be careless. At a critical juncture, when the various countries were paying tribute, a citizen of another country had been killed in the Great Zhou. The impact would be even worse. If they were not careful, it would incite conflict between countries. This was especially so when the Shun kingdom was already disloyal. They could use this as an excuse. Mr. Mei walked out from behind the curtains and said, "Your Majesty, please move to the Ziwei Palace and order the Ministry of Justice to immediately bring the people involved in this case to the palace." Assistant Minister Yang of the Ministry of Justice stood out and said respectfully, "Yes, Your Majesty." After that, he strode out of the hall and quickly walked out of the palace. Ministry of Justice. A group of people gathered outside the Ministry of Justice and discussed animatedly. That citizen of the Shin Kingdom clearly fell on his own and hit the stone steps. You can't blame anyone else, but if that young man didn't chase after him, he wouldn't have fallen. Nonsense. If he didn't steal, would others chase after him? But he's dead in the end, and he's from another country. I'm afraid that young man will have to pay with his life. Within the Ministry of Justice, Assistant Minister Yang looked at Wei Peng and sighed. He said, "The envoy of the Shin Kingdom is using this opportunity to make a statement. If this matter isn't handled well, I'm afraid that something big will happen." "Where's that criminal? I have to bring him to the palace." Wei Peng nodded and said, "He's in the prison. I'll go get him." He walked into the prison of the Ministry of Justice and opened a cell door. He said to a pale-faced young man, "Let's go. I'm afraid this is your only chance to enter the palace in your life." The young man's face was filled with despair. He said in a trembling voice, "Sir, I don't want to die yet." Wei Peng glanced at him and asked, "Why do you want to die?" The young man's body trembled. He said with infinite regret, "If I didn't chase after him, you wouldn't have died." Wei Peng asked in return, "You were just in a hurry. When did you chase after him?" Chapter 430. Outside the prison, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Yang Lin, shook his head at Wei Peng and said, "It's useless. Once we reach the Golden Palace, we just need to search his soul and the truth will be revealed. Have you forgotten what happened 5 years ago?" Wei Peng patted the thick Law of the Great Zhou in his arms. He looked at the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice and said meaningfully, "Sir, times have changed." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice sighed and said, "I don't know if times have changed or not. I only know that during this year of tribute, the Shun Kingdom has always had ulterior motives. They will definitely use this as a pretext to make a fuss. This time, they will definitely not let go of this opportunity." He patted Wei Peng's shoulder and said, "Let's go. You also go to the palace. You know more about this case than I do. When we reach the palace, be careful what you say." The young man looked nervously at Wei Peng and asked, "Sir, I have never been to the palace. What should I do later?" Wei Peng said indifferently, "It's very simple. When we reach the palace, don't say or do anything. Palace, Crepe Myrtle Palace." Today's lunch banquet was already nearing its end. After the emergency of the Shun Kingdom people dying in the Great Zhou Shindu, the important officials of the Great Zhou all moved to the Crepe Myrtle Palace. The envoys of the various countries also followed. At this time, most of the officials still didn't know what had happened. Soon, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice brought 2 people into the palace. After the report, everyone knew what had happened. This Shin Kingdom person had stolen a precious piece of jewelry from a jade shop in the Shindu. After being discovered by the shopkeeper, he fled through the door. The shopkeeper went out to chase after the thief, but because of his old age, he was left further and further behind by the thief. A passerby saw injustice on the road and helped the shopkeeper chase after the thief from the Shin Kingdom. Unexpectedly, the thief panicked and accidentally fell. Coincidentally, his head hit the top of the stone steps on the street. Immediately, his brain splattered and he died. As a result, the courageous citizen of the Great Zhou became the murderer of this person. In the palace, many of the officials of the Great Zhou had extremely gloomy expressions. Every time the various countries paid tribute, other than diplomatic missions, there would also be some merchants accompanying them, bringing goods from various countries to be sold in the divine capital. In the beginning, when Great Zhou was at its peak, all countries, regardless of whether they were diplomatic missions or merchants, were well-behaved and abided by the laws of Great Zhou. They didn't dare to do anything that violated the law. But in the past 50 years, with the decline of Great Zhou's national power, the intervals between tributes from other countries gradually increased, and the tributes gradually decreased. The actions of foreigners in Great Zhou also became more and more unbridled. By the time of the previous emperor, Great Zhou had completely lost the spirit of a great country. Furthermore, in order to rope in these small countries and prevent them from leaving the Great Zhou while he was in power, the previous emperor even gave them a lot of preferential treatment. From the beginning, merchants from other countries were exempted from all taxes in the Great Zhou, to indulging them in breaking the law and even committing crimes within the Great Zhou's borders. The law of Great Zhou could govern the citizens of Great Zhou, but couldn't govern the citizens of other countries. This caused the previous emperor's reign to be the most aggrieved period for the citizens and officials of Great Zhou. This aggrieved feeling reached its peak 5 years ago. 5 years ago, the last time the various countries paid tribute, a merchant from the Shin nation raped a woman in the divine capital and was injured by a righteous man. The Shin nation diplomatic mission flew into a rage and threatened that if Great Zhou didn't give them a satisfactory explanation, they would sever their tributes with Great Zhou. In order to maintain stability, the previous emperor publicly executed that righteous man, but released the criminal from the Shin nation. This became the most humiliating diplomatic incident in the history of Great Zhou. It forcefully broke the backbone of the citizens of Great Zhou, causing the citizens of other countries, especially those from the Shin nation, to act recklessly in Great Zhou. However, the citizens of Great Zhou didn't dare to voice their anger. 5 years later, this scene repeated itself once again. Perhaps Xinghua had done it on purpose. In the Crepe Myrtle Palace, the Shin nation diplomatic mission said with a cold expression, "A citizen of my Shan nation died in your Great Zhou. The Great Zhou court must severely punish the murderer and give us an explanation." At this moment, under the gazes of the people in the imperial court, a figure slowly stepped forward. Wei Peng looked at the Shin nation diplomatic mission and asked, "Murderer? What murderer?" The Shin nation diplomatic mission said, "Of course it's a murderer who caused the deaths of our citizens." Wei Peng shook his head and said, "A merchant from your country committed a theft in the Great Zhou's divine capital. When he was escaping, he accidentally fell and hit the stairs and died. What does this have to do with others? How can there be a murderer?" The Shin nation diplomatic mission said coldly, "Who are you? What does this have to do with this case?" Wei Peng said indifferently, "I'm the head of the Ministry of Justice, Wei Peng. I have been invited by my client to act as his defense in this case. I will speak on his behalf." The Shin nation diplomatic mission pondered for a while before he understood that this official from the Great Zhou was trying to exonerate this person. His expression became even more unfriendly as he said, "Even if he stole first, according to the laws of your Great Zhou, this crime does not warrant death. If that person did not chase after him, he would not have died. In the end, this person is still the murderer who caused his death." When the Shin nation diplomatic mission said this, the officials in the imperial court could already confirm that the Shin nation had come prepared this time. They actually knew the laws of the Great Zhou so well. If this kind of thing happened to a citizen of the Great Zhou, it would be somewhat unclear. Furthermore, it was a foreigner. This case became somewhat difficult to judge. At this moment, Wei Peng looked calmly at the Shin nation diplomatic mission and asked, "Who said that my client was chasing after him? My client was just in a hurry. Your merchant was panicking and died from hitting the stairs. What does this have to do with my client?" When Wei Peng's words came out, whether it was the officials in the imperial court or the envoys from the various countries, they were all stunned. This reason was really amazing. Prince Shou was so shocked that his mouth opened wide. He said in surprise, "This kid is a talent." The Shin nation diplomatic mission quickly reacted and said coldly, "He was running while shouting, 'Stop,' and 'Don't run.' Could it be that he was also in a hurry?" Wei Peng said indifferently, He was in a hurry and was thirsty. He happened to see a vendor carrying tea and wanted to ask for a cup of fermented rice wine to quench his thirst. Is that not allowed? The Shin Nation diplomatic mission glanced at him and said coldly, "You can quibble. As long as you let us search his soul, the truth will naturally be revealed." Impudent. Another figure walked out from the crowd. Zhang Chun's face darkened as he said loudly, "Who do you think you are? A barbarian country. Are you worthy of searching the souls of my great Zhou citizens?" After the various countries' envoys arrived in the Great Zhou, they realized that the Great Zhou had changed greatly in the past few years. Naturally, they did a detailed investigation of the Great Zhou court. They all knew the identity of the person who was reprimanding the Shun Nation diplomatic mission. Zhang Chun was the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel and the minister of Imperial Ancestral Temple. He was loyal to the Empress of the Great Zhou and did not belong to either the old or the new party. At the same time, he was also the most loyal dog under the powerful Minister Li Mu. The Shin Nation diplomatic mission's face was extremely cold. He gritted his teeth and said, "The citizens of the Shun Nation died in the Great Zhou Shindu." Is this the attitude of the Great Zhou? After a short silence, a majestic voice finally came from behind the curtain at the front of the hall. The people of the Shin Nation stole first and accidentally fell to their deaths while escaping. They brought this upon themselves and cannot blame others. There is no need to discuss this further. The Empress's voice echoed in the hall. In the end, she only left 2 words, "Court dismissed." The Empress's words undoubtedly determined the nature of this case. After the court was dismissed, the officials of the Great Zhou walked out of the Crepe Myrtle Hall and couldn't help but straighten their backs. Although the Great Zhou had been the most powerful country on the Zhou continent for the past 100 years, it had been a long time since they had straightened their backs in front of the envoys of these small countries. At this moment, there was only one thought in the minds of the many officials. The Empress was mighty. The envoys of the various countries walked out behind the Great Zhou officials with different expressions on their faces. It had also been a long time since they had seen such a powerful Great Zhou. The Empress of the Great Zhou did not give any face to the Shin Nation. She did not even search the soul of the Great Zhou citizen and directly ended the case. She was not afraid of the threats of the Shin Nation diplomatic mission and did not give them a chance. They had once thought that the Great Zhou's national fortune had declined and would not last long after a woman ascended to the throne, reversing yin and yang and reversing the universe. No one had expected the Empress of the Great Zhou to be so powerful. They once again felt the aura of the ruler of the Zhou continent from her. The Shin Nation diplomatic mission left without a word. It was not until this moment that they realized that the Great Zhou of today was no longer the Great Zhou of 5 years ago. The man from Yong Kingdom breathed a sigh of relief and said, 5 years ago, the people of the Great Zhou were cold and heartless. They did not help the elderly on the road, and they did not stand up for injustice. I once saw with my own eyes that the people of the Shin Nation dragged a woman from the Great Zhou into a dark alley. The onlookers ignored them. I did not expect that 5 years later, a frail scholar would have the courage to step forward. The times have truly changed. The seriously ill lion of the Great Zhou has once again stood up. The young man beside him took a deep breath. The dignified voice of the Empress of the Great Zhou still echoed in his ears. He raised his head and resolutely said, "There will be a day when I will also become that kind of person." After the envoys of the various countries returned to the Chamberlain of Dependencies, they closed their doors and did not leave. This trip to the Great Zhou was full of surprises. They needed to plan carefully. Li Mu did not go to the Changle Palace. Instead, he walked out of the Imperial Palace with the other officials. Outside the Imperial Palace, there were already many commoners waiting to see what was going on. They did not dare to approach the other officials. When they saw Li Mu come out, they immediately surrounded him, all of them talking at once. Officially, how was it? How did Her Imperial Majesty decide? Will that righteous man pay with his life? Li Mu looked at their earnest gazes and smiled. It's been so long. You all still don't understand Her Imperial Majesty's temperament. How could she allow us, the people of the Great Zhou, to be bullied by outsiders on our doorstep? Her Imperial Majesty has already said that the people of the Shin nation apologized first. They only have themselves to blame and deserve to die. It has nothing to do with others. That righteous and courageous young man has already been acquitted and will leave the imperial palace in a moment. The commoners around him all cheered and jumped for joy when they heard this. That's great. Her Imperial Majesty is mighty. There were also some commoners who thought further and asked Li Mu worriedly, officially, if the people of the Shin nation use this as an excuse to stop paying tribute to the Great Zhou, what should we do? Li Mu said calmly, they can choose to pay tribute or not. If they don't pay tribute, would our Great Zhou not be the largest country in the Zhou continent? Great Zhou has vast lands and abundant resources. Do we lack their tributes? The commoners were stunned for a moment. After thinking about it, they quickly came to their senses. Official Li is right. Our Great Zhou has vast lands and abundant resources. Do we need their tributes? They can ride on our heads and ride roughshod over us. We don't need such tributes. If we take their tributes, we have to be bullied by them. We don't need their tributes. They can pay whoever they want. In order to record him well in the history books and to prevent the other countries from breaking away from the Great Zhou, the former emperor tolerated the other countries. God knows how much the people of Shindu suffered and how much suffering they suffered. When the merchants of other countries bullied the people of Shindu, the commoners dared not speak up. When the people of Shun raped women, the former emperor, who was muddle-headed, actually executed the righteous people who saw injustice. Great Zhou was a great country. As the people of Great Zhou, they could have been proud and arrogant. However, under the former emperor's muddle-headed policies, the commoners of Shindu were inferior to the people of other countries. The commoners had long had enough of this. Li Mu originally wanted to keep the tributes from the other countries. After all, it was the symbol of Great Zhou as the most powerful country in the Celestial Empire. After this incident, he had changed his mind. It was better not to ask for tributes. The former emperor wanted to use this method to gain a good reputation in the history books. However, he was scolded even more harshly by the historians. He was completely nailed to the pillar of shame in history. During his reign, the Great Zhou's national strength declined the fastest. The faith of the people declined the most. He even lost the throne of the Shao family. If nothing went wrong, he would be the most humiliated emperor of the Shao family. If he kept the tributes, the commoners would not praise him. If the empress did not want the tributes, she would have won back the dignity of the commoners. The commoners would not scold her. The tributes from the other countries should be paid willingly. They used the tributes in exchange for the protection of the Great Zhou. This was a kind of transaction. It was also their recognition of the strength of the Great Zhou. Li Mu had to let the commoners understand this principle. In the future, even if they did not pay the tributes, the commoners would not think it was the emperor's fault. He looked at the commoners in front of him and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, remember that the former emperor has passed away for 5 years. Great Zhou is no longer the Great Zhou of the past. From now on, no matter where you are in the Great Zhou, you can straighten your backs. You are the people of the Great Zhou. Behind you is the most powerful country in the Zhou continent." When he said this, he used a trace of his dermic powers. His voice echoed in the ears of the surrounding people. Yes, the former emperor has passed away for 5 years. Now our emperor is Her Majesty the Empress. What right does a barbarian country have to ride on our heads? It should have been like this long ago. As the commoners thought about this, many of them breathed rapidly. Their eyes started to turn red. You are the people of the Great Zhou. No matter where you are, you can straighten your backs. They had been waiting for this sentence for a very, very long time. Lord Li was right. The former emperor had passed away for 5 years. The people of the Great Zhou could stand up. At this moment, all the commoners present subconsciously straightened their backs. Seeing the two people walking out of the palace gates, Li Mu said, "Lord Yang." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice immediately walked forward and asked, "Lord Li, what are your orders?" Li Mu said, "The Great Zhou laws are used to protect the people of the Great Zhou. From now on, no matter which country you are from, as long as you dare to violate the laws of the Great Zhou in the Great Zhou, you will be severely punished." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice immediately bowed. "I understand." Li Mu patted him on the shoulder and whispered, "You have a high rank. You don't have to call me I in the future." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice only gave a simple and honest smile. Rank did not explain everything. Everyone in the court knew that Lord Li and the Empress wore the same pants. It was not excessive to respect him as much as the Empress. Moreover, in his lifetime, he still wanted to rely on Li Mu to get promoted and move to a bigger residence at the palace gates. The commoners had already dispersed. Li Mu's words were still echoing in their minds. The news spread from 1 to 10, and from 10 to 100. It wouldn't be long before everyone in the fairy's capital knew what he had said. Not long after, in a restaurant. It was lunchtime. The restaurant's business was good, and there were no empty seats. At some point, a few dark-skinned men wearing strange clothes walked into the restaurant. They glanced at the customers who were eating in the restaurant. One of them walked up to the counter and said to the manager in bad Great Zhou language, "We are from the Shun dynasty. Ask the rest of the people here to go out and arrange a good private room. We will serve all the dishes you have here." The manager of the restaurant had just heard Lord Li's words at the palace gates. He was overwhelmed with excitement. He glanced at the men and said coldly, "I've only heard of the Great Zhou. I've never heard of the Shin dynasty. Which barbarian country are you from? There's a seat in the corner over there. If you can sit, then sit. If you can't, then leave. Don't disturb our business here." The Shin dynasty merchant was used to running amok in the Great Zhou. This time, he brought his friends with him. He did not expect the lowly commoners of the Great Zhou to be so impudent to him. His face instantly darkened. He said sternly, "How dare you? Do you know who you are talking to?" Bang! "You want to stir up trouble?" The manager slammed the abacus on the table and sneered. "Fellows, report this to the authorities." Inside the Chamberlain of Dependencies. In the courtyard where the young envoy resided, a middle-aged man stood on the roof, overlooking the entire divine capital. A strange light flashed in his eyes. The divine capital of the Great Zhou, which was surging with psychokinesis, shone with a golden light in his eyes. Chapter 431. The ambassadors of the various countries had come with a premeditated plan. They wanted to sever their relationship with the Great Zhou to further attack the people of the Great Zhou. It had been a tradition for the countries of the Zhou continent to pay tribute to the Great Zhou for more than a century. If the various countries declared independence, the Great Zhou would only exist in name as the strongest country on the Zhou continent. This would cause the people of the Great Zhou to continue to lose their support. If the people's support was lost, it would be difficult to gather the emperor's qi, and the royal family would be unable to produce new experts. It wouldn't be long before the Great Zhou went from decline to decline. This was something that the various countries were happy to see. However, when they walked out of the Honglu Temple, they found that there were only a few figures on the streets that had been abnormally crowded yesterday. After some investigation, they found that the people of the divine capital had spontaneously gone to the ancestral temple to pay tribute. Because the people were paying tribute, the streets were empty. How united was the people of the divine capital? Under these circumstances, even if they stopped paying tribute, the impact on the people's support would be minimal. Even if they stopped paying tribute, it would instead cause the people of the Great Zhou to be more united. In the following half a day, the Ministry of Justice arrested dozens of foreign merchants who had violated the laws of the Great Zhou. They were flogged at the entrance of the Ministry of Justice, attracting countless people to watch. Their cheers could be heard from several streets away. There were also a few who had seriously violated the law and were likely to face several years of imprisonment. The ambassadors of the various countries protested this matter to the Great Zhou court, requesting that the Ministry of Justice release the relevant people, but they were rejected. One of the ambassadors of the Shen nation asked around and returned to the Honglu Temple. He said to his companion, "I've asked around." When a memorial was delivered to the Great Zhou Secretariat, it was shot down. It was done by that Li Mu. This person is unmoved by force or persuasion. He's not afraid of anything. Another ambassador of the Shin nation thought for a moment, then said, "There's no other way. Let's just directly protest to the Empress of the Great Zhou. I don't believe that she's not afraid of us cutting off our tribute to the Great Zhou. If that happens, she'll become a sinner for all eternity." In the Changle Palace, Li Mu handed a memorial to the Empress, who was reading a book, and asked, "Your Majesty, the Shin nation's envoy threatened the imperial court. If we don't release them, they will cut off their tribute to the Great Zhou. How should I respond to them?" Zhou, he flipped to a page and said indifferently, "Write a decree. From today onwards, the Great Zhou and the Shin nation will sever their tributes. Didn't they refuse to pay tribute? In the future, they won't have to pay tribute anymore." Li Mu nodded and said, "As you wish." Not long after, Mr. Mei walked into the Honglu Temple. His voice resounded in all directions. "Envoy of Shun country, receive the imperial edict." Two figures walked out of a courtyard and stood quietly in front of Mr. Mei. They sneered in their hearts. As expected, it was better to hand the memorial directly to the Empress of the Great Zhou. There was a result so quickly that Li Mu didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. But how could the Empress of the Great Zhou not know the importance of the big picture? Mr. Mei looked at them indifferently and said, "Her Majesty has decreed that the Shin nation's merchants are of inferior character and have violated many laws within the Great Zhou. The Shin nation's envoy did not restrain his people and instead made unreasonable demands of the Great Zhou court. From today onwards, the Great Zhou and the Shin nation will sever their tributes." Mr. Mei had already finished speaking, but the Shin nation's envoy was still frozen in place. Their most important mission this time was to sever their tributes to the Great Zhou. Now that they had achieved their goal, they didn't feel any sense of accomplishment. 5 years ago, the Great Zhou Emperor gave them too many benefits and begged them to continue their tributes. 5 years later, the Empress of the Great Zhou took the initiative to sever the relationship between the two nations. After Mr. Mei finished reading the imperial edict, he floated away, leaving the envoys in the Honglu Temple looking at each other. Although the imperial edict only mentioned the Shin nation, it also sent a message to all of them. The Empress of the Great Zhou didn't care about the tributes of the other nations. If they used this as a threat, they would probably end up like the Shun nation. From now on, everyone here would have to reconsider their relationship with the Great Zhou. Changle Palace. After learning that the Shun nation envoy had left the Honglu Temple in anger, Li Mu's mouth twitched in disdain. The Empress wasn't so easily threatened. She had always been amenable to coaxing and not coercion. The Shin nation people had clearly miscalculated if they wanted to use the method of threatening the previous emperor to threaten her. She didn't even want to be the Empress of the Great Zhou, much less the overlord of Zhou province. If the other nations wanted to pay tributes, they could play by themselves. To the Empress, growing grass and flowers, playing aeroplane chess with Xiao Bai and Wan Wan, and painting with Li Mu were perhaps more attractive than these things. She didn't care about whether or not the other nations paid tributes. She even gave Li Mu full authority to receive the envoys. Regardless of the other nation's ulterior motives, the Great Zhou had to have the bearing of a great nation. Although there was no need to give them special privileges over the people of the Great Zhou, she still had to do her part as a host. According to the rules of previous years, after the imperial court banquet, the envoys would be taken on a tour of Shun due to show off the glory of the great nation. During the month of tributes, the people of Shandu would wash the streets and paint the houses. This had already become a tradition. They strove to show the best of the Great Zhou in front of these small nations. In previous years, officials from the Ministry of Rites were in charge of this. Li Mu had never presided over this before. He specially came to the Ministry of Rites to consult the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rites. How was this arranged in previous years? The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rites said, "Lord Li, in the past, one of the 6 ministries and 9 temples would be chosen as the place for the envoys to visit. After the selection, they would be notified at least a day in advance so that the officials could make preparations." After he finished speaking, he asked again, "Lordly, which government office will we choose this time?" Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Whatever." The next day, at the entrance of the Department of Offerings, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rites looked at the envoys and said, "This is the Department of Offerings of the Great Zhou. Everyone, please." The envoys all had expressions of interest on their faces. In the past, the Great Zhou court would only allow them to visit the 6 ministries and 9 temples. This was the first time they were allowed to visit the Department of Offerings. The Department of Offerings was the place where the experts of a nation gathered. From the Department of Offerings, one could see the foundation and strength of a nation. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rites led the crowd in slowly. They passed through the front yard of the Department of Offerings and came to an extremely wide open space. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rites took the initiative to introduce, "This is the place where the offerings practice their martial arts." On the open space, ripples of mana could be felt. At the very front, on a small slope, stood a human-shaped target. One of the worshippers who exuded the aura of the 5th tier waved his hand, and a dozen or so talismans flew out from his sleeves, creating a violent wave of spiritual energy that knocked down the human-shaped target and also raised the slope to the ground. This scene made the envoys' throats dry up. Every single one of those Fulu was above the earth rank. These Fulu talismans were hard to come by in their countries. Anyone who owned one would have to keep it as a life-saving trump card. The Great Zhou's offering was actually so extravagant as to use more than 10 earth-rank Fulu talismans for target practice. This was too wasteful. Just from that attack, just now, even a 6th-level cultivator would have to deal with it. Those below the 6th level would probably not even be able to escape with their primordial spirits. Another consecrator flicked his finger lightly, and a black pill-shaped object flew towards another human-shaped target. The 2 objects collided. After a strong spatial ripple, the human-shaped target was swallowed by a black hole in the void. Many people swallowed their saliva secretly. If this object landed on them, they probably would not be able to avoid the fate of being swallowed. This strange method of attack was simply unheard of. With his hands behind his back, Li Mu turned around and saw the shocked expressions of the crowd. He smiled and said, "Everyone, don't be nervous. The offering is just practicing against the enemy. It's all routine." In the next 2 hours, Li Mu brought the envoys to witness the routine of countless Great Zhou's offering. This included various powerful Fulu talismans, pills, and formations made by many offering that could trap a 6th-level cultivator to death. In the past, it would take 10 talisman liquids to draw 1 Fulu. Now that they could draw 10, the offering naturally did not have to be thrifty. They just needed to blow it up. If they did not have enough, they could ask for more. The imperial court was not lacking in Fulu now. In addition to spending thousands of Fulu talismans for the Empress, Li Mu and the Empress also refined some of the ancient pills that they had comprehended from the pages of Tao. They gave them to the offering so that they could familiarize themselves with using them in advance, so that they could be more proficient against the enemy in the future. 2 hours later, the envoys walked out of the offering department. Their faces were somewhat pale. The scene that they saw in the offering department had left a deep impression on them. Was this the strength of the Zhou continent's overlord? Li Mu looked at them and said, "By the way, His Majesty has decreed that all countries no longer need to pay tribute to Great Zhou in the future. Great Zhou is still facing internal and external troubles. We really have no time to take care of the other countries. You may all return." The envoys from the small countries looked at each other, swallowed their saliva, and immediately spoke. "We have to pay tribute. We have to pay tribute. We can't break the century-old rule. The state of Wei is loyal and devoted to Great Zhou. We will never be disloyal. We pledge our lives to follow Great Zhou." Chapter 432. It wasn't that the envoys from the small countries were spineless, but that they were truly frightened. It was one thing for Earth-rank Flu to bombard indiscriminately, and it wasn't a big deal for unheard of Pill Dao attacks. It was possible to find flaws in a joint attack formation, but who had ever seen a wall covered with heaven-rank Fulu just for people to admire? That was a precious heaven-rank fulu, not some cabbage. Before coming to the Great Zhou, they had come to the conclusion that the Great Zhou was going to fall. After visiting the Great Zhou's Department of Offerings, they deeply realized that the Great Zhou was the absolute king of the Zhou continent. They began to panic. Not long after Li Mu returned to the palace, the Ministry of Rites sent over a report. Just now, after the envoys from the small countries finished visiting the Department of Offerings, they immediately sent the list of tributes to the Ministry of Rites. These small countries were different from the other 6 countries. No matter how much the Great Zhou declined, it wasn't something they could contend against. The reason they didn't immediately offer tributes was because they were observing the other countries. After witnessing the power of the Great Zhou with their own eyes, they all put away their hesitation. In the Chamberlain of Dependencies, the envoys from the other countries gathered together, their hearts particularly complicated. The envoy from Liang sighed deeply and said, "I originally thought that the invasion of the Great Zhou was the beginning of its decline. I didn't expect that this would be their chance to rise again." The envoy from you said helplessly, "The Great Zhou is indeed the Great Zhou. Fortunately, we made sufficient preparations. Otherwise, it's very likely that we would have fallen to the same fate as the Shun Kingdom." After some hesitation, the envoys from Jiang and Jing also spoke up. "The tributes cannot be cut off. Not only must they not be cut off, but they must be restored to their former state. We must satisfy the Great Zhou." Only an hour later, Li Mu received another message. Liang, Yu, Jing, Jiang, and Yong had also sent a list of tributes to the Ministry of Rites. They indicated that this was only the first batch of tributes, and that the second batch would arrive within half a year. In the Changle Palace, the Empress, who was reading a book while reclining on her dragon throne, snorted coldly and said, "Have the Ministry of Rites send the items back. The Great Zhou does not lack this bit of tribute, nor do we need them to pay tribute." Li Mu hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, please reconsider. Please reconsider. Do you still want to grow flowers and plants as soon as possible?" Although Zhou Yi disdained to pay attention to the capricious people of the other countries, what Li Mu said was what she cared about the most. Accepting tributes from the other countries was good for rallying the people's hearts. She picked up the book again and waved her hand. "Forget it. I don't care anymore. You decide." Li Mu said, "Then I will accept their tributes on behalf of your Majesty." Although the tributes from the other countries didn't make much of a difference to the national treasury, it made a big difference to the people of the Great Zhou, who didn't want their motherland to be strong. Accepting tributes from the other countries could strengthen the cohesion of the people, increase the happiness of the people, and increase their psychokinesis and speed up the condensation of imperial qi. If the Empress wanted to retire from her position as Empress soon and spend her old age with Li Mu, it was best not to be willful. Li Mu had just finished drafting the edict when Mr. Mei walked in and said, "Your Majesty, an envoy from the Yong Kingdom is outside the palace, requesting an audience." Zhou Yi put down her book and sat up from her dragon throne. "What is the Yong Kingdom doing here?" she asked. Mr. Mei shook his head. "I don't know. Does your Majesty wish to see them?" Zhou Yi thought for a moment, then said, "Have them wait outside the imperial study." The Changle Palace was her sleeping quarters. She generally didn't receive foreign officials here. Zhou Yi stood up, glanced at Li Mu, and said, "Come with us." Among the 6 countries, the Yong Kingdom wasn't the strongest, but it had the most prospects. The 4 countries of Liang, Yu, Jiang, and Jing relied on the support of the 4 Taoist sections. Without the 4 Taoist sects, the Yong Kingdom would immediately be reduced to a low-tier country. The Shun Kingdom was the birthplace of Buddhism. It wasn't small and had a large population. However, there were too many internal problems, and the quality of the people was generally low. The Great Zhou had once thought the Shun Kingdom to be very powerful, but after fighting it once, they discovered that the Shun Kingdom was only strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Only the Yong Kingdom's strength was truly powerful. Disregarding everything else, a country with less than a tenth of the Great Zhou's population, had condensed 3 strands of Emperor's qi within 50 years, creating 3 transcending mortality experts for the Yong Kingdom. The Great Zhou had 10 times the population of the Yong Kingdom and was known as the strongest country on the Zhou continent. Yet, in the same amount of time, it had barely managed to condense 1 strand of Emperor's qi. Just based on this, the Great Zhou's previous emperor and the previous emperor would be ashamed even if they were lying in their coffins. It wasn't hard to guess how condensed the Yong Kingdom's people's qi was. A single country had produced 5 generations of wise emperors. If he hadn't transmigrated, it wasn't impossible for the Yong Kingdom to defeat the Great Zhou and unify the Zhou continent several decades later. The Imperial Study. This was the place where the Empress received foreign officials outside of the morning court session. The layout was very similar to the Ziwei Palace. The Empress stood behind a curtain, while Li Mu stood in the middle of the hall. Before long, Mr. Mei led 2 people into the study. One was a middle-aged man, and the other was a young man. They were the envoys sent by the Yong Kingdom. The middle-aged man cupped his hands and bowed to the Empress, saying, "Greetings, Your Imperial Majesty, the Empress of the Great Zhou." The Empress asked from behind the curtain, "Envoys from the Yong Kingdom, what business do you have with us?" The middle-aged man replied, "Before this subject came to the Great Zhou, I was ordered by the Emperor to request a mutual waiver of tariffs between the Great Zhou and the Yong Kingdom in order to promote friendly trade between the 2 countries." The Empress's voice quickly reached Li Mu's ears. "What do you think?" Mutual waiver of tariffs between the 2 countries had both advantages and disadvantages. If they retained their advantages and curbed their disadvantages, it would be a good thing for the people of both countries. The Yong Kingdom's monarch clearly had foresight that others didn't possess. Li Mu stepped forward and said, "This matter still needs to be discussed in detail. I will give you an answer in a few days." The middle-aged man cupped his hands and said, "This is a matter that will benefit the people of both countries. I hope Your Imperial Majesty will be able to judge this matter clearly. We will quietly await the good news." Not long after, the 2 men withdrew from the Imperial Study. The Empress walked out from behind the curtain and said, "This matter," Li Mu replied, "leave this matter to this subject." The Empress looked at Li Mu with satisfaction before finding Xiao Bai, Wan Wan, and the others to play mahjong. Li Mu remained in the Imperial Study, pondering over the matter that the Yong Kingdom's envoy had just spoken of. At the very least, the removal of trade barriers between the 2 countries was beneficial to the common people. They could use cheaper prices to purchase goods from the other country. However, if they didn't control it well, it would be a devastating blow to the merchants of their own country. Which goods should have their tariffs reduced? Which goods should have their tariffs reduced? How to reduce them? How to reduce them? How to reduce them? Li Mu first went to the Ministry of Revenue. After spending a few days doing his homework, he already had some ideas. He arrived at the Chamberlain of Dependencies and knocked on a courtyard door. The one who opened the door was the young man from the Yong Kingdom's envoy. When he saw Li Mu, his expression froze, appearing somewhat flustered. Li Mu strolled into the courtyard. Glancing around, he saw an easel propped up in the courtyard. On the canvas, a painting was nearly completed. It depicted an extremely handsome man, about as handsome as Li Mu. When he looked again, was it the man in the painting himself? After staring blankly for a moment, Li Mu seemed to have thought of something. Turning around, he stared at the young man and asked in an unfriendly tone, "Why did you draw this official's portrait? Are you planning to find an assassin to assassinate this official after returning to your country?" If not for Li Mu, the other countries would have been able to laugh at the ridiculousness of the Great Zhou, especially Great Yong. In the future, Great Yong would have the possibility of unifying the Zhou continent. If one had to say who they hated the most, it would naturally be him. The Yong Kingdom's envoy had drawn his portrait for no apparent reason. Li Mu had enough reason to suspect that this person harbored evil intentions. Hearing his words, the young man became even more flustered. Promptly shaking his head, he said, No, I drew it casually drew it." Li Mu glanced at the painting again. The painting had both form and spirit. and it was extremely lifelike. In particular, the expression in the eyes was no different from that of a real person. It gave one the impression that the person in the painting would walk out of the painting at any moment. If this was called a casual drawing, then what were Li Mu's recent paintings called? At this moment, Li Mu felt that he had been insulted. Chapter 433. Casually drawn? Li Mu shot him a disdainful glance and said, "Why don't you casually draw another one for me to see?" To draw such a likeness of him and use such a careless reason. It was hard for Li Mu not to suspect that he had some other motive. Could it be that he really wanted to assassinate him? The young man walked to the drawing board, took off the canvas, and covered it with a new piece. He held a brush in his hand, and after he landed it on the canvas, he quickly drew something. It was so fast that Li Mu could only see the afterimage. After a moment, the youth put down the brush in his hand, and another Li Mu appeared on the canvas. Compared to the previous Li Mu, the likeness was even more vivid and lifelike. Li Mu was dumbstruck, as if he was looking at another him. He even had the misconception that the person in the painting had taken a step forward. Li Mu quickly discovered that this was not a misconception. One of the legs of the man in the painting really stepped out, and a man who looked exactly like Li Mu appeared in front of him. Although this was only a paper person that quickly faded away, Li Mu sensed a trace of the painting Dao from it. The painting had become real. This was the ultimate technique of the painting Dao, creating something from nothing. As his emotions churned, the youth took out a dozen or so paintings from his room and spread them out in front of Li Mu. He said, "I casually drew these. I had no intention of harming you. I was only practicing." These dozen or so paintings included scenery and people. The scenery was of the divine capital, and the people depicted the various states of the divine capital. However, this was no longer important. This young envoy's cultivation was not high, but he actually knew the painting Dao. It was truly a case of wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it by chance without any effort. He definitely knew the basics of the painting Dao. Li Mu had been longing for this for a long time. Li Mu's mind raced, but his expression regained its calm. He said, "Enough. This official believes you." Hearing this, the youth from Yong breathed a sigh of relief. Li Mu did not mention this matter again. He asked, "As for the matter of the mutual reduction of tariffs and friendly trade between the two countries, it still needs to be discussed. Where is the person in charge of the Yong diplomatic mission?" The youth replied, "The ambassador is not present. This humble one can make the decision on this matter." Li Mu sized him up with an odd look. This young envoy was young, but the authority he wielded was not small. After the two were seated, Li Mu got straight to the point and said, "After the discussions of my court's ministers, everyone unanimously believes that the mutual reduction of tariffs between the two countries will not benefit our great Zhou. On the contrary, it will intensify competition and attack our merchants. It will also reduce local taxes. Out of the protection of our great Zhou's merchants and local taxes, the officials of the Ministry of Revenue do not agree to the mutual reduction of tariffs between the two countries," the young envoy argued. This humble one believes otherwise. The mutual reduction of tariffs will make goods cheaper. This will be beneficial to the common people, as it will allow them to buy what they need at a lower price. Although this will intensify the competition between merchants to a certain extent, an appropriate amount of competition is beneficial to the development of commerce. This will benefit the people of both countries. If tariffs are reduced, it will inevitably attract even more merchants, and local taxes will only increase, not decrease," Li Mu regretfully said. "This official has no choice but to admit that your noble country's proposal is very good. This official also fully approves of it. However, this official's words carry little weight. I cannot oppose the entire Ministry of Revenue, unless—" The youth's eyes brightened. He asked, "Unless what?" Li Mu replied, "Unless someone can convince His Imperial Majesty. If His Imperial Majesty agrees, then the Ministry of Revenue's opinion will not be important." The youth stood up and bowed to Li Mu. He earnestly said, "This is a matter beneficial to the people of Great Zhou. Darren Lee is deeply loved and respected by the common people. I ask that Darren Lee consider the common people of both countries and facilitate cooperation between the two countries. Li Mu sighed. Although this official shares your thoughts, I cannot disregard the opinions of the entire Ministry of Revenue and speak before His Imperial Majesty. Otherwise, won't this official become a treacherous official who bewitches His Imperial Majesty into making arbitrary decisions? The youth replied, "The eyes of the common people are as clear as snow. If Darren Lee is a treacherous official, then there will be no loyal officials in the Great Zhou." When he said this, his tone was somewhat complicated. They had actually made 2 preparations for their trip to the Great Zhou. If the Great Zhou was an arrow at the end of its flight, they would break off the tributes and wait for the day when the Great Zhou collapsed. Then, Great Yone would find an opportunity to dominate the Zhou continent. If the Great Zhou was still powerful, they would abandon the first plan and strengthen trade and cooperation with the Great Zhou, vigorously develop the domestic economy, and raise the standard of living of the common people. Li Mu sighed. This official truly wishes to help, but is powerless to do so. The courtiers already have complaints about His Imperial Majesty's favor and trust in this official. If this official opposes the Ministry of Revenue again, who knows what they will say about this official behind my back? Perhaps they will say that this official was bribed by the state of Yong and received benefits from you, harming the interests of the Great Zhou. Speaking on your behalf, isn't this the same as framing this official as being heartless and unjust? He looked at the young envoy and said, "For this matter, you will have to personally seek out Her Imperial Majesty." Disappointed, the young man replied, "Darren Lee is Her Imperial Majesty's most favored subject. If your words are useless, then even if we seek an audience with Her Imperial Majesty, it will be futile." Li Mu did not speak. His face revealed a contemplative expression, as if he was hesitating. A moment later, he looked back at the young envoy and said, "This official is fully aware that friendly trade between the two countries is greatly beneficial to both the people of the two countries and the court. Although this official is unable to directly help you due to my status, I can point you in the right direction." The young man's eyes lit up again. Cupping his fist, he said, "Please advise me, Darren Lee." Li Mu looked at him and asked, "You should know that Her Imperial Majesty is very interested in painting, right?" The young man nodded. "I saw it a few days ago. The paintings hanging on the walls of Her Imperial Majesty's study are authentic works by Wu Daoxian." Even when the Empress mentioned the art sage, her tone was respectful. However, this young man from the Yong Kingdom directly called him by his name, not even adding the word sage. Perhaps there really was something to him. Li Mu casually asked, "If my guess is correct, you should be cultivating and painting, right?" The young man did not deny it. Nodding, he replied, "Yes." Li Mu unhurriedly said, "From what I know, Her Imperial Majesty is very fond of painting. Moreover, she is deeply in love with the art sage's authentic works. For many years, she has been searching for the lost inheritance of painting. If you can fulfill Her Imperial Majesty's wish, then the matter of trade will not be a problem." After saying this, he slowly stood up and said, "This official's words end here. I can't say anything more. Think about it yourselves." Finished speaking, he turned and left. The middle-aged man walked out of the room. The young man raised his head to look at him and asked, "Royal uncle, what should we do?" The middle-aged man did not answer. Instead, he asked, "What do you think?" After thinking it over, the young man said, "Reducing tariffs and opening up trade with Great Zhou is a blessing for the common people of Great Yong. Although painting is an important part of the heavenly tomes, it is not that it cannot be taught to outsiders. Daoist cultivators are all aware of this. In the past thousands of years, they have become even more powerful. It is precisely because the other sects do not teach it to outsiders that they have declined." The middle-aged man smiled and said, "Since you have already made your decision, there is no need to ask me." Recalling Li Mu's reminder, the young man sighed with emotion and said, "No wonder Great Zhou has risen again so quickly. The Empress of Great Zhou looks down on the other countries, possessing the spirit of a celestial empire. The officials she has placed in important positions also have such insight. They are intelligent and not lacking in ingenuity. Most importantly, they have the hearts of the common people, establishing their hearts for the heavens and earth, and establishing their lives for the common people. A real man born between the heavens and earth should be like this. It is a pity that he was not born in my great young. The middle-aged man also sighed and said, "The Empress of Great Zhou has exceptional insight. If the previous Emperor of Great Zhou had been at death's door for another 10 years, or if the Great Zhou family had not seized the imperial aura and seized power, then today's Great Zhou would not be like this. Everything is predestined." Li Mu walked out of the Chamberlain of Dependencies and leisurely strolled through the streets. The streets were bustling with activity. Li Mu patiently responded to the greetings of the common people along the way. Along the way, he bought 3 sticks of Tonghalu. Thinking of Wan, he hesitated for a moment before buying 3 more sticks. Afterwards, he continued to walk forward. This time, after walking for a short while, he heard a voice behind him. "Official Li, please wait." Li Mu turned his head to look at the young man and asked, "Is there anything else?" The young man handed a letter to Li Mu and said, "I request Official Li to deliver this to Her Imperial Majesty, the Empress." Li Mu accepted the letter and nodded his head. It just so happens that this official needs to make a trip to the palace. The young envoy cupped his hands in gratitude and said, "Thank you for your advice, Official Li." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "It is all for the common people." Chapter 434. Changle Palace. Li Mu handed the letter from a young envoy to the Empress. "Your Imperial Majesty," the young envoy asked this subject to deliver this letter to Your Imperial Majesty. "Please take a look, Your Imperial Majesty." Zhou, he was eating Tonghulu and didn't accept the letter. "We don't have time right now. Open it yourself and see what's written on it." Li Mu opened the letter and took out a piece of paper. Sweeping his eyes over it, he whispered, as expected, at the top of the paper were the words Painting Sutra written in large letters, followed by a line of small letters that read, Divine Brush Ling Ling, opening to Shanqing, Liujia Fu Wei, Shi Song Luding Ding. I am now a calligraphy seal concealing my body, meeting gold, meeting fire, hiding in the earth, the heavenly emperor, the sage. This letter contained the formula for the Tao of painting. Only by using this formula could one display the Tao of painting. As expected, the Tao of painting was also a type of Taoist technique. It didn't create objects out of thin air. It was between illusion and reality, yet it was more brilliant than both. It possessed more of a bewitching nature than Taoist techniques, and at the same time, it possessed a power that illusion didn't possess. After pondering for a moment, Li Mu took out his brush and drew a simple rune in the air. This time, a golden rune finally lit up in the air in front of him. In the next moment, the rune transformed into a golden thread that bound Shangwan Li's body. Shangwan Li coldly snorted and puffed out her chest. The golden thread collapsed, but at least it proved that Li Mu's conjecture was correct. By using the Tao of painting in the Fu Lu, ancient talisman techniques could be reproduced. Although the two were fundamentally different, the Tao of painting borrowed the power of heaven and earth. It didn't consume much of one's transcendence energy, and it could last longer in battle. The premise was that one had to simultaneously cultivate both Taoist techniques. Li Mu and the Empress studied for a few years, and would certainly be able to better utilize the Tao of painting in the Fu Lu. With the Yong Kingdom's sincerity, Li Mu ordered the Chamberlain of Dependencies to hold a banquet and invite the Yong Kingdom's envoys to discuss the details of the friendly relations between the two countries. The countries in Zhou province needed to pay tribute to Great Zhou, but the tariffs between Great Zhou and the other countries were not light. In order to win over the other countries, the former emperor exempted them from the tariffs. It was only after the empress ascended the throne that the tariffs returned to normal. This was the first time in history that the Great Zhou and the state of Yong had established trade cooperation at the national level. After the banquet ended, The assistant minister of revenue walked out of the chamberlain of dependencies with a face full of doubt. He muttered, "Could it be that this official has offended the young envoys? Why do I feel that they have a problem with this official?" Li Mu chuckled and said, "Assistant minister, you're thinking too much. I didn't feel anything at all. Perhaps it's just your imagination." The assistant minister of revenue nodded and said, "This official must have thought too much." Finished speaking, he left with his doubts. The young envoy walked out of the chamberlain of dependencies and cupped his hands in greeting to Li Mu. "This humble one, on behalf of the king and the people of the state of Yong, thanks Li Darren for your kindness in guiding us. In the future, if Li Darren has the opportunity to come to my state of Yong, this humble one will do his best as a host." Li Mu nodded and said, "Let's talk about it again in the future." After watching Li Mu leave, he sighed softly and said, "If only he had been born in my state of Yong." The middle-aged man indifferently replied, "This is the fate of the nation. It cannot be forced." The month of tribute ended, and the envoys of the various countries returned to their countries. This time's tribute was different from the past. As the sovereign state, Great Zhou had once again established its prestige and status on the Zhou continent. Although it had severed its tributary relationship with the Shun Kingdom, one of the 6 neighboring countries, the public opinion had risen to a new height. In the past few tributes, the people of the Shun Kingdom had committed numerous crimes in the divine capital under the deliberate cover of the previous emperor, creating a psychological shadow in the hearts of the common people. Great Zhou had taken the initiative to sever its tributary relationship with the Shun Kingdom, but it had also reconnected with the common people. Li Mu had already asked the empress to announce this matter to the world and change the laws. From now on, within the borders of the Great Zhou dynasty, no matter which country they were from, they would be treated equally and punished according to the laws of the Great Zhou dynasty. The purpose of this move was to tell the people of the Great Zhou that the era of the previous emperor was gone forever. The people of the Great Zhou could now stand up again. The Zhu Wei spies in the Shun Kingdom also passed on some information. A citizen of the Shun Kingdom had died in Great Zhou. The Great Zhou court had sheltered and connived at the criminal, severed its tributary relationship with the Shun Kingdom, and even arrested a few merchants from the Shun Kingdom. After the Shun Kingdom's envoys returned, they spread the news throughout the Shun Kingdom. Very quickly, it caused a huge uproar. All over the Shun Kingdom, citizens began to gather and march, demanding that the Great Zhou hand over the murderer. A portion of the people of the Shun Kingdom destroyed the goods they had bought from the merchants of the Great Zhou. They also initiated a nationwide boycott of the merchants of the Great Zhou and the goods of the Great Zhou. There were also some people of the Shun Kingdom who declared that the power of the Shun Kingdom had long surpassed that of the Great Zhou. They said that they would soon go to war with the Great Zhou, and that the declining Great Zhou would be unable to resist the brave soldiers of the Shun Kingdom. In less than a month, they would be able to fight their way to the Great Zhou's divine capital. The Shun Kingdom's imperial court didn't respond to this. The Shun Kingdom was already in chaos, but in the Great Zhou, there wasn't the slightest ripple. When the news reached the Great Zhou, all the court officials didn't even have the mood to discuss it. Li residence. With the formation closed, Li Mu held a brush in his hand and drew a door on the wall. He easily pushed the door open and walked out. Soon after, he closed the door, and the wall returned to its original state. Li Mu then activated the formation and stood outside the formation. Using the brush, a gap quickly appeared in the protective formation of the Li residence. It was as if Li Mu had opened a hole, allowing him to easily walk into the formation. After several days of trial and error, Li Mu had figured out other uses of the Tao of painting. Aside from being used to draw talismans, the Tao of painting could also be used to break through formations and pass through walls. It was practically unstoppable. No matter how sturdy a wall was, a door could be opened. Opening a hole in an ordinary formation was even easier. The Tao of painting wasn't the strongest offensive ability, but it was superior in its strangeness. Opening a hole in a formation was something that no other Tao could accomplish. Once Li Mu's attainments in the Tao of painting caught up to that youth from the Yong Kingdom or the Empress, he would be able to use this Tao to do even more things. In the past few days, Li Mu's life had been fulfilling and meaningful. At the same time, he cultivated 4 Taos: Tao Buddhism, Yao, and painting. Every day, aside from dealing with memorials and daily cultivation, he also had to temper his body with Shangguan Li in the astral winds of the 9 heavens. He also had to learn painting from the Empress. He didn't even have much time to accompany Wan Wan and Xiao Bai. During dinner today, Li Mu noticed that Wan Wan ate 1 bowl less than usual. It wasn't just dinner. It seemed that her appetite hadn't been very good these past few days. Yesterday, she even ate less candied haws. He had been busy cultivating these past few days and had neglected her. Before going to bed at night, Li Mu looked at Wan Wan, who seemed to have something on her mind, and asked softly, "What's wrong? Did someone make you angry?" Wan Wan shook her head and whispered, "No, it's just that I miss Miss." Chapter 435. The Empress could temporarily keep Wan Wan's mouth, but she could not keep her heart forever. For as long as she could remember, she had been by Lu Hanyan's side. After being separated from her for so long, she was naturally not used to it. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing were now at Mount Baiyan. They were being nurtured as the next head. They needed to cultivate diligently every day and could not return to the divine capital. However, this could not go on. In order to reinvigorate Wan Wan, Li Mu planned to send her back to Lu Hanyan's side. After the envoys left, there was nothing much to do in the imperial court. Li Mu could also make a trip back to Mount Baiyan. In Changle Palace, Li Mu finished dealing with the last memorial. He turned around and said to the Empress, "Your Majesty, I need to send Wan Wan back to Mount Baiyan. I will be back in a month at the latest." Zhou put down her book and asked, "It's just a trip to the North County. Will it take a month?" Li Mu said, "A few days ago, the Office of Consecration received news that a fox demon was causing trouble in Zhejiang County. The local government was unable to suppress it. I can go investigate on the way. It might take a few days." Zhou was a little dispirited. She said, "Then you can go." Li Mu stood up and bowed. "I will take my leave first." Walking out of Changle Palace, Li Mu held Wan Wan's hand in one hand and Xiao Bai's hand in the other. He prepared to return to the Li residence to pack up and leave early the next morning. Wan Wan was not as happy as Li Mu imagined. More specifically, she was happy one moment and sad the next. Li Mu could not help but pinch her face. He asked, "I'm going to take you to see your young miss. Are you still not happy?" Wan Wan sighed. "I'm happy." Li Mu asked, "Happy? Why are you sighing?" Wan Wan said worriedly, "There are only vegetables and tofu in the mountains. I haven't finished tasting the dishes in Sister Zhou's imperial kitchen. There were 36 counties in the Great Zhou, and each county had hundreds to thousands of local dishes. The imperial kitchen had gathered all the famous chefs in the 36 counties, and new dishes were constantly being introduced. It was impossible to try all the dishes." Li Mu was suddenly curious and asked Wan Wan, "If you can only stay in one place in the future, would you be willing to stay by your young miss side in Mount Baiyan, or would you be willing to stay by Big Sister Zhou's side in the Imperial Palace?" Wan Wan froze for a moment, then began to pinch her fingers. At this moment, it often meant that she was in a dilemma. After thinking for a long time, she raised her head and asked, "Can't Miss come to live with us in the palace?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "How can there be such a good thing? Between your miss and Sister Zhou, you can only choose one." Wan Wan hesitated for a long time, but she still could not make a decision. She said, I still want both." Li Mu knocked her on the head and said unhappily, "So greedy at such a young age. Where did you learn this from?" In Changle Palace, Zhou sighed softly and said, "This little girl, why can't she be fed properly?" Mount Baiyan, Fulu School had very strict requirements for its core disciples. Li Qing and Lu Hanyan were being nurtured as heads of department, so they also cultivated very diligently. When Li Mu brought Wan Wan and Xiao Bai to Mount Baiyan, Li Qing was still in seclusion. Lu Hanyan just happened to come out of seclusion, but 3 days later, she had to enter seclusion again. Wanwan tightly hugged Lu Hanyan's arm and said, "Miss, I miss you so much." Lu Hanyan pinched her face and said, "Not bad. It hasn't been long since we last met, but your cultivation has improved so much." Wanwan hugged her arm and asked, Miss, when will you return to the divine capital?" Lu Hanyan sensed that she still had something to say, so she asked, "It'll be a long time." "What's wrong?" Wanwan said, "When Miss returns to Fairy's capital, I'll bring you to the imperial kitchen to eat. There's countless delicious food there, and it's different every day. When the time comes, Miss can also stay in the palace." Sister Zhou will definitely agree. Lu Hanyan first glanced at Li Mu, then smiled at Wanwan and asked, "Who taught you to say these words?" Li Mu spent the entire night to successfully prove to Lu Hanyan that he didn't teach Wanwan those words. Lu Hanyan had already occupied the Empress's place once. It would be unreasonable to do it again. Lu Hanyan was only a little annoyed that Wanwan kept calling her Sister Zhou. It was as if someone else was wearing her cotton jacket. 3 days later, Lu Hanyan went into seclusion again. Wanwan and Xiao Bai stayed at Baiyun Peak. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing often went into seclusion these days, but they didn't stay for long. The shortest was 3 to 5 days, and the longest was 10 days to half a month. Normally, it wouldn't exceed a month. Taking advantage of Lu Hanyan's seclusion, Li Mu left Baiyun Peak and came to Zhejiang County alone. Zhejiang County was one of the counties in the north of the Great Zhou. It was adjacent to the Yao Kingdom, and most of its land was covered by forests. Compared to the other counties in the Great Zhou, Zhejiang County was more chaotic. There were often demons causing trouble, and it was also a county that the Consecrations Department paid more attention to. Because it was close to the Yao Kingdom, the demons causing trouble in Zhejiang County were usually stronger. The local government of Zhejiang County couldn't handle them, so they would seek help from the Consecrations Department. Before Li Mu left the divine capital, the Consecrations Department received a request for help from Zhejiang County. It said that there was a fox demon causing trouble in the county. The fox demon was at least 5-tailed, and the county government couldn't suppress it. To be safe, the Consecrations Department would send at least 3 Creation Realm experts to deal with a 5-tailed fox demon. Li Mu happened to be sending Wanwan back to Baiyun Peak, so he came to take a look. Firstly, it was to quell the chaos in Zhejiang County. Secondly, it was a 5-tailed fox demon. Perhaps it knew the cultivation method for a fox demon after reaching the 5-tailed stage. The earlier Li Mu obtained it, the earlier Xiao Bai could cultivate it. Ever since she became a 5-tailed fox demon, her cultivation hadn't increased for a long time. Zhejiang County had many mountains, and even the county city was a city in the mountains. At the most conspicuous spot at the city gate of Zhejiang County City, there was a notice posted. The notice said that a fox demon had been causing trouble in Zhejiang County recently and had injured many cultivators. The government announced that if a cultivator could capture or kill the fox demon alive, they would be rewarded handsomely by the imperial court. The fox demon had caused quite a commotion in Zhejiang County recently. Even the commoners knew about it. Within the county city, there were discussions about the demon everywhere. I heard that the fox demon has already cultivated 5 tails. It's very powerful. Many cultivators have had their dermic powers sucked away by it. It's not just sucked away their dermic powers. I heard that even their hearts, livers, spleens, lungs, and kidneys have been dug out and eaten. I'd better not go out for now. When will the government eliminate this fox demon and restore peace to Zhejiang County? As Li Mu walked on the streets, he heard many rumors about the fox demon. It was possible that the fox demon had sucked away the dermic powers of cultivators. However, the rumors of it eating people's hearts and livers were purely based on reading too many supernatural novels. For a demon to be able to cultivate into a human form, its habits were similar to that of a human's. A normal person would not do such a thing. Similarly, a normal demon would not do such a thing. However, sucking away the dermic powers of others to cultivate was forbidden by the imperial court. Regardless of whether one was a human or a demon, they all had the freedom to cultivate in the Great Zhou. However, The precondition was that they did not harm or harm others. The imperial court had always been strict about taking shortcuts by harming others. Limu found a restaurant and ordered a pot of tea and a few dishes. He planned to go to the Zhejiang County Yamen to inquire about the fox demon's whereabouts after he finished eating. He would capture it and help Xiao by find out about the cultivation method. It was lunchtime, and there were many customers in the restaurant. Li Mu's gaze casually swept across the crowd. His gaze lingered on a table in the corner for a few seconds. There were 5 people at that table. They were all cultivators. 2 of them were in the creation realm, while the other 3 were in the transcendent realm. This kind of strength was naturally not worth mentioning in the 6th sex or the Department of Offerings. However, in a small county city, they could be considered a powerful force. It should be known that in the Zhejiang County Yamen, there were only 2 in the creation realm and 1 in the transcendent realm. Their lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. It was as if they were communicating through dermic powers. Li Mu had no interest in eavesdropping, but these people had a strong murderous aura. When they communicated through dermic powers, the smiles on their faces were too vulgar. It was obvious that they were not plotting anything good. It was very easy to attract Li Mu's attention. In order to make sure that they were not planning something that would harm the people, Li Mu closed his eyes and moved his ears slightly. It was a type of demonic technique that originated from the Bat clan's innate divine power. It could easily eavesdrop on their dermic powers. Those people from the Yamen are really stupid. They believed us so easily. It's a pity that they are too useless. They can't even deal with a 5-tailed fox demon. In the end, they had to ask others for help and almost ruined our plans. It would be such a pity if the target that we've been eyeing for so long was obtained by others. That fox demon is not easy to deal with. If those people hadn't injured her, we wouldn't have had a chance until now. Hurry up and eat. Once we're done, we'll act immediately. That fox demon should still be recuperating. We can't delay any longer. If the Great Zhou Court sends a true expert, our efforts over the past few months will have been in vain. A 5-tailed fox demon will definitely sell for a high price. Big brother, after we capture her, can you let me have some fun first? I haven't had a taste of a 5-tailed fox demon yet. T. A fox demon that hasn't been touched by anyone is only valuable. Take care of that damn thing of yours. Li Mu opened his eyes, picked up his teacup, and took a light sip. It was such a coincidence that he would meet the instigators of the fox demon incident at a random restaurant. The cause of the incident was that these 5 people had their eyes on the fox demon. However, they were no match for the fox demon, so they came up with this plan of borrowing the power of the local government to weaken the fox demon first. Then, they would be able to take advantage of the situation behind the scenes. It was a wishful thinking. The Great Zhou was a human government. Generally speaking, the people of the Great Zhou referred to the humans who lived in the Great Zhou. For the imperial court, if demons harmed people, the government had to kill them. However, killing demons by humans was not something the government should be concerned with. These 5 heretical cultivation practitioners had used this reason to make use of the Zhejiang County government. Their goal had been that fox demon from the very beginning. There were evil demons who ate the essence, blood, and souls of humans. There were also evil humans who killed demons for their cores. There was also a group of cultivators who did not walk the righteous path. Because they were afraid of the imperial court, they did not dare to attack the common people. Therefore, they targeted demons. Killing people was against the law, but killing demons did not count. Even if the Great Zhou Court found out, they would not do anything to them. In Li Mu's eyes, these people were no different from those evil demons. When he was halfway through his meal, the 5 people had already left their table and strode out of the restaurant. Li Mu left a silver ingot and walked out slowly. Not long after, outside the Zhejiang County, a thin man closed his eyes and sensed. He pointed in a direction and said, "The blood curse's reaction is over there. Let's go." As he finished speaking, several figures shot up into the sky and flew forward. At a certain moment, the thin man suddenly stopped and looked back. The other 4 people also stopped and asked, "Big brother, what's wrong?" The middle-aged man looked back and said, I keep feeling that someone is following us. The other 4 people immediately became alert. They looked around, but found nothing. One of them was puzzled and said, There's nothing. Big brother, are you mistaken? Another person said, Even if someone is following us, it's impossible for there not to be any fluctuations of mana. Big brother, are you being too sensitive? The thin man looked around and said, Maybe I'm thinking too much. Let's go. The 5 people continued forward and quickly disappeared. But after the time it took to drink a cup of tea, they appeared out of thin air. The man who disappeared looked around again and sighed in relief. He said, Looks like there really isn't anything. One of them smiled and said, I already said, Big brother is being too sensitive. Let's go quickly. If that fox demon escapes, it will be difficult to find. The 5 people flew away again. On the ground, an invisible figure followed behind them at a leisurely pace. The invisibility spells of Taoism were of little value and could only be used on mortals. In front of cultivators of the same level, they would definitely be exposed. Although invisibility spells could prevent any fluctuations of mana, he could only rely on the strength of his legs. If he used spells to fly or ride on clouds, he would be easily discovered. Fortunately, Li Mu cultivated 2 Taoism. His body was far stronger than normal cultivators. Even if he only relied on the strength of his legs, he would not lose sight of him for a while. After only 15 minutes, he sensed a strong fluctuation of mana in front of him. The few heretical cultivation cultivators should have been fighting with the fox demon and could not take care of this place. Li Mu put on his clothes and hid behind a tree to observe the situation in front of him. 5 heretical cultivation cultivators were besieging a woman. The woman's cultivation seemed to be at the 5th level, but she seemed to be injured. Her breath was extremely unstable. Under the siege of the 5 heretical cultivation cultivators, she could not fight back at all. After taking a few blows, her breath became even more chaotic. Li Mu thought to himself, if he saved the fox demon at this time, she would be indebted to him for saving her life. Even if she was not of the Heavenly Fox clan, as her savior, he did not need her to repay him with her body. As long as she told him the cultivation method of the Heavenly Fox clan, it should not be too much, right? Thinking of this, Li Mu wanted to take action. Half of his body was already out of the tree, but he suddenly shrank back. In the distant sky, more than 10 figures were rushing over. These figures all exuded a strong aura. Li Mu hid behind the tree and took a peek. He could not help but be shocked. Among the 10 people, the woman in the lead was Phantom Princess. Chapter 436. Huan Ji led the group over. Seeing the fox demon covered in wounds and weak aura, she immediately realized something. She glanced at the 5 heretical cultivation cultivators and gritted her teeth. You deserve to die. The Fox Clan elites beside her were also enraged. They took out their Dharma treasures and weapons and attacked the 5 evil cultivators. Huan Ji flew to the fox demon and asked, Are you okay? Although the fox demon didn't know the woman in front of her, she felt a very familiar aura from her. She knew that the woman was a fox like her. Not only the woman, but the others also had a demonic aura. She relaxed and said, I'm fine. Thank you, sister. Huan Ji held her hand and transferred her spiritual energy into her body. She asked, Why were you chased by these people? Speaking of this, the fox demon's face was filled with anger. She gritted her teeth and said, These villains captured many of my people and sold them to those despicable humans. They also targeted me. They framed me for harming people and asked the government to gather human cultivators to kill me so that they could reap the benefits. If you didn't save me, I would have been in their hands. Huan Ji's face was filled with hatred. She said angrily, These despicable humans. On the other side, the 5 heretical cultivation cultivators were complaining in their hearts. They thought that victory was in their hands, and they would soon capture the fox demon that they had been eyeing for months. Fox girls were rare in the black market, not to mention a five-tailed one. If they were lucky enough to meet a rich buyer, they could exchange it for a lot of spiritual jades. But who would have thought that just as they were about to succeed, so many people would suddenly appear out of nowhere? These dozen or so people were all at least at the fourth realm. At least four of them were at the fifth realm. The three divinity realm evil cultivators were quickly captured. The other two fifth realm cultivators could only put up a resistance for a short while before their dermic powers were sealed and they were tied up tightly. Huan Ji looked coldly at them and said, "Take them back and deal with them." Li Mu hid behind a tree and hid his aura. He didn't choose to help these people. This was their own sin, so they had to bear the consequences. At this moment, he was thinking about something else. If he went out now, what were his chances of taking down Huan Ji? Huan Ji's subordinates were negligible, but she herself was not easy to deal with. As the second generation of the demon race, she had countless magic treasures. Li Mu had already experienced it once. Although Li Mu was not afraid of her, this was Jiujiang County, which was adjacent to the demon nation. If Huan Ji were to summon the Lord of Illusions, he would be in big trouble. After thinking about it for a long time, Li Mu still did not take the risk. Not far away, Huan Ji said to the fox demon, "Sister, your injuries are not light. Why don't you come to my place to recover? After you recover, you can choose whether to stay or leave." The fox demon didn't think for long before she nodded and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you, sister." Her injuries were indeed not light. Although they were not fatal, she could not use much of her strength. At this moment, a transcendent realm cultivator could capture her. The woman in front of her whom she had never met before was of the same clan as her. The Fox clan would not harm their own. Huan Ji supported her and said, "Let's go." Just as she was about to leave, she suddenly frowned. She reached out and a palm-sized compass appeared. The needle on the compass spun quickly and finally pointed in a certain direction. Huan Ji looked in that direction and her face sank. She said sternly, "Who is there? Come out." As soon as she finished speaking, several of her subordinates behind her flew towards a huge tree. Behind the tree, a figure squatted down and said in fear, "Don't kill me, don't kill me. I'm just passing by." A man looked at the figure and asked, "Who are you?" The figure looked up and revealed a handsome face. His expression was one of fear as he said with a trembling voice, "I'm not a human, I'm a demon." At this moment, they realized that his body was emitting a faint demon aura. It was not strong and seemed like he had just transformed. The man frowned and asked, "Why are you sneaking around here?" The young man pointed at the 5 heretical cultivation cultivators and said, I was passing by and saw them fighting. I was afraid that they would kill me, so I hid here." The man sized up Li Mu and walked to Huan Ji. He said, "Lord Huan Ji, it's a small demon." Huan Ji nodded and said, "Let's go." Just as the man was about to leave, he turned around and looked at the little demon. He thought for a moment and said, "Sir, this little demon is very handsome. Although he is a bit timid, he might be of great use in the future if we train him." The others sized up the small demon again. They realized that although this demon was not strong, he was very handsome. Soft skin and tender flesh. Not bad. This is rare even in Meizong. Not only is he rare, even the young Chui Ming would have to avoid him. The man looked at Huan Ji and said, "Lord Huan Ji, Meizong is lacking in manpower. With his small demon's appearance, he might be able to carry Meizong in the future." Huan Ji looked at the small demon and thought for a moment before saying, "Go ask him if he's willing to join Meizong." The man walked to the small demon and asked, "Small demon, what's your name?" The small demon lowered his head and shivered. He said, "My surname is Wu. You can call me Yinzu." As he spoke, his human eyes gradually turned into a pair of green vertical pupils. The change in the small demon's eyes proved his identity. The man pointed at Huan Ji and said to the small demon, "Little snake, that's Lord Huan Ji of Meizong. Are you willing to join Meizong and follow Lord Huan Ji?" The small demon hesitated for a moment and asked softly, "Is there any benefit in joining Meizong?" The man smiled and said, "There are many benefits. In the Meizong sect, You can obtain spiritual jades for cultivation and also receive guidance from experts. Lord Illusion Princess's father, Lord Illusion Heaven Lord, is a 7th level Shin demon. If you can receive his guidance, maybe you will have the chance to become a great demon in the future. When the small demon heard this, his eyes lit up. He immediately nodded and said, "Then I'm willing." The man patted him on the shoulder and said, "Then let's go." After keeping the small demon, the group flew into the air again. The handsome demon did not have enough spiritual power and was carried by the others. They flew all the way to the demon country in the depths of the 100,000 mountains. The man beside the small demon looked at him and asked, "Little snake, what other relatives do you have in your family? Aren't you going to tell them?" After a while, the small demon was already familiar with them. He said, "My parents were killed by human cultivators long ago. I've always been alone. I don't have any relatives." In the group, another person gritted his teeth and said, "Damn humans. How many demons have died in their hands? They write about demons eating humans all day long. Why don't they write about humans killing demons? Demons killing humans is intolerable. Humans killing demons is enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens." The small demon said, "Not all books are written like that. There's a book called Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio. It's written quite well. There are evil people in it, but there are also demons who are affectionate and righteous." The man said, "I know about this book. Lord Huan Ji likes to read it. She even asked us to find Pu Songling and pay him a visit. Unfortunately, we haven't found him." He shook his head and said, "There aren't many people like Mr. Pooh who are sensible. Most of the humans keep saying that the monsters are evil, but what have they done? Killing the monsters, taking their souls, stealing our monster cores, capturing the female monsters of the fox race and the snake race, sealing their cultivation base, and providing them with entertainment. It's not just female demons. Many handsome male demons were also captured by them to satisfy the different desires of humans. Little snake, you're just lucky. With your looks, if those humans saw you, they would definitely capture you and make you do that kind of thing with them." The small demon was stunned. Then, he said embarrassedly, "There's such a good thing?" The man patted his shoulder and said, "You're thinking too much. If you're lucky, they'll make you accompany those old women. If you sleep with them for one night, you'll have nightmares for 10 days. If you're unlucky, they'll make you accompany men. Haha, do you still think it's a good thing?" The small demon was so scared that his face turned pale. He said, "Too scary, too scary." The man beside him smiled and said, "Don't worry. Now that you're with Lord Huan Ji, no one can bully you. Cultivate well in the future. Only when you're strong can you control your fate as a demon." The small demon's face became serious. He said, "I know. Thank you, big brother." Chapter 437. The group flew across the 100,000 mountains. Half a day later, they landed in a city in the mountains. The handsome little demon asked the handsome man next to him, "Brother Hujio, where are we?" The handsome man smiled and said, "This is the Thousand Fox Country. It's also where the Meizong sect is located." After entering the city, everyone dispersed. Hujio said to Limu, "Come with me." Although the Thousand Fox Country was a demon country, the demon capital was no different from a human city. There were streets, shops, all kinds of buildings, tea houses, taverns, and even brothels in the city. If it weren't for the demon chi emitting from the people passing by, it would be impossible to tell that this was a demon country. Although the demon race and the human race were often at odds with each other, they also yearned for the human race's appearance and the splendid culture they created. The royal family of the Thousand Fox Country were fox demons, but there weren't many fox demons on the streets. Most of them were demons of other races that were attached to the fox race. The other demon countries were probably in a similar situation. In addition to demons, there were also humans on the streets, but there were very few of them. They should all be from the Meizong sect. Hujio led the little demon through several streets and walked into a very large mansion. The two of them came to a side courtyard near the front of the mansion. Hujio brought him to a room and said, "This is Lord Huan Ji's mansion. You can stay here for now. When you have enough contributions, You can use your contributions to move out and live in a separate mansion. Okay, you rest first. I'll come and see you tomorrow morning. Hu Jio walked out of the room, and the door closed automatically. The handsome little demon sat on the bed and let out a long sigh of relief. When he was discovered by Phantom Princess during the day, Li Mu wanted to escape directly into the sky teapot space. But on second thought, this was a rare opportunity. If he missed it, Xiao Bai's cultivation would be delayed for a long time. As the saying goes, you can't catch a fox without entering the fox's den. For Xiao Bai's cultivation and to find out the details of the Meizong sect, Li Mu finally chose to take the risk. Only by getting close to Huan Ji would he have the chance to obtain the subsequent cultivation methods of the Fox clan. Furthermore, he wanted to find out how many spies Meizong had planted in the imperial court. The Meizong sect liked handsome and beautiful men and women. As an enemy, the Phantom Princess had extended an olive branch to Li Mu from the start. It could be seen that the Meizong sect was lacking in people. Of course, Li Mu could not use his original appearance. For safety's sake, he pretended to be an extremely handsome snake demon. For Li Mu, who possessed the demon clan's heavenly book, pretending to be a demon was a simple matter. He could even use the demon race's divine ability to change his form and transform into a snake. What happened after that went according to his expectations. As long as they didn't get too close to Lord of Heaven Illusion, they wouldn't be discovered. On the way there, Li Mu had already learned from Hu Jiu that Lord of Heaven Illusion had just gone into seclusion. Moreover, the seclusion this time was extremely long. Before the seclusion, he had completely handed over Meizong to Huan Ji. In other words, Thousand Fox Nation and Meizong sect would not have a seventh realm powerhouse guarding them for a very long time. In other words, Li Mu could do it boldly. Right now, he was just a newcomer and couldn't gain Huan Ji's trust. He could only take one step at a time and wait for the right time. He first secretly sent a message to Lu Hanyin and the Empress, informing them of his plan and telling them not to worry. Then, he turned off the lights and went to sleep. From now on, he was an ordinary little demon in Huan Ji's residence. The next day, Li Mu had just woken up when a familiar voice came from outside the door. "Little snake, are you awake?" It wasn't Li Mu's first time seeing Hu Jiu. When Huan Ji brought people into the White Emperor cave abode last time, Hu Jiu was by her side. Perhaps Hu Jiu felt that this name was familiar, so she didn't call him by the fake name he gave himself. Li Mu got out of bed, opened the door, and asked with a smile, "Big brother Hu Jiu, what's the matter so early in the morning?" Hu Jiu walked into the room and put a pile of things on the table. She introduced them one by one. "This is your waist token, which can prove your identity as Meizong sect. These spiritual jades are the cultivation resources you can receive every month. Originally, with your level, you only received 10 pieces, but Lord Huan Ji said that you just joined Meizong sect, so she gave you an extra 10 pieces this month. I see that you don't have any weapons, so I'll give you this sword. Although it's not a powerful Dharma treasure, it should be enough. Other things aside, Meizong sect treated newcomers very well. Not only did they provide him with food and accommodation, but he also got paid before he made any contributions to Meizong sect. Not to mention other things, just the sword in Li Mu's hand at this moment was of a higher grade than Bai Yi. Hu Jiu continued, "Your strength is too low, so I don't have any important tasks for you for the time being. You should cultivate slowly and advance to the upper realm as soon as possible. Now, you have to come with me to see Lord Huan Ji." Walking out of the courtyard, Li Mu asked, "Big brother Hu Jiu, why is Lord Huan Ji looking for me?" Hu Jiu smiled and said, "Don't worry. Although Lord Huan Ji has a noble status, she usually treats her subordinates very well. Following Lord Huan Ji, there are countless benefits. She should be looking for you today because of the sect entrance ceremony." What sect entrance ceremony? You'll know in a while. Hu Jiu led Li Mu all the way and soon entered a spacious courtyard. The courtyard was very large. There were artificial mountains, ponds, grass gardens, and everything else. Huan Ji stood with her back to the door. Hu Jiu led Li Mu in and bowed. "Lord Huan Ji, I've brought him here. Li Mu also bowed and said, "Greetings, Lord Huan Ji." Huan Ji turned around, looked at Li Mu, and said lightly, "Those who enter my Meizong sect must abide by the rules of Meizong sect and keep the secret of Meizong sect. Those who betray Meizong sect, even if you escape to the ends of the earth, I will personally kill you. You still have the chance to go back on your words." Li Mu pointed to the sky and said, "I, Daniel Wu, swear to the heavens that if I betray Meizong sect, let me become a dog." For the Snake Clan, there was nothing more ruthless than this oath. Li Mu learned this from the two sisters, Yin Xin and Ting Xin. Hu Jiu smiled and said, "Your Snake Clan still doesn't like the Dog Clan." Li Mu coldly snorted and said, "From the moment they pledged allegiance to humans, they were no longer Monster Clan, but our enemies." Huan Ji crossed her arms and said, "Well, as long as you do one more thing, you can become an official disciple of Meizong sect." Li Mu cupped his fists and said, "Please instruct me, Lord Huan Ji." Huan Ji pointed to a stone statue next to the rockery and said, "Slash it with your sword." Although he didn't know what strange rule this was, Li Mu still walked to the stone statue next to the rockery. When he raised his sword, he was stunned for a moment, but it was only for a moment. Then, the sword in his hand fiercely slashed down. Clang! Li Mu's sword slashed the stone statue, leaving a shallow sword mark. He walked back and asked curiously, "Why do you want to slash this stone statue?" Huan Ji looked at him indifferently and said, "This is not something you should ask." On the way back, Hu Jiu explained to Li Mu, "That person is Lord Huan Ji's enemy. If you meet him in the future, you have to avoid him." Li Mu was confused and asked why. "If I meet him, shouldn't I kill him to avenge Lord Huan Ji?" Hu Jiu glanced at him and said, "Then you have to have the ability to do so. This person's Dharma power is very strong. Countless cultivators of the devil's doctrine have died at his hands, including the first elder of the Origin Soul sect, Nether Saint. If you could kill him, you wouldn't be here." Li Mu smiled embarrassedly and asked, "What enmity does this person have with Lord Huan Ji? Why does Lord Huan Ji hate him so much?" Hu Jiu glanced at him and said, "Don't ask about Lord Huan Ji." Li Mu immediately became serious and said, "I know." Hu Jiu added, "However, if this person happens to fall into your hands in the future, don't kill him. Bring him back and hand him over to Lord Huan Ji. You will receive countless benefits and even have the chance to comprehend the Heavenly Book. Although that Heavenly Book belongs to the Fox Clan, other clans can also benefit from it." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Forget it. Even such a strong person is not his match. Wouldn't I be courting death if I go?" Hu Jiu slapped his head and said angrily, "You are a snake demon. How can you be more cowardly than a rat demon? You are a disgrace to the Snake Clan." Li Mu laughed and said, "There is nothing wrong with being careful. Only by being careful can we live longer." Hu Jiu nodded and said, "That's right. That Li Mu is not only strong, but also very handsome. Even a strong person like the Empress of the Great Zhou is infatuated with him. It is said that he often goes in and out of the palace and sleeps in the Empress' bedroom." Li Mu said in surprise, "You know this too?" Hu Jiu smiled and said, "The spies of the Meizong sect are all over the world. You will know in the future." Li Mu's eyes shone with admiration and said, "The Meizong sect is too powerful." Hu Jiu breathed a sigh of relief and said, "That Li Mu is the powerful one. He did what Shui Ming couldn't do in 20 years in 2 years. It is said that in the Imperial Court, he is in charge of the Imperial Court alone. If we pull Li Mu into the Meizong sect, every move of the Zhou Kingdom will be under our control. We can even control the Great Zhou through this person." Li Mu laughed dryly and said, "Good plan." Hu Jiu continued, "However, that Li Mu is a very upright person. I'm afraid it won't be easy to win him over. However, we can take advantage of his lecherous characteristics and think of a way to let the women of the Meizong sect seduce him." Li Mu was stunned for a moment and said, "Lecherous?" Hu Jiu nodded and said, "According to our spies in Luoyang, every time Li Mu goes out, there must be beauties by his side. His wife is an outstanding beauty, and the two concubines by his side are also first-class beauties. One of them is the most beautiful woman in our fox tribe. Not to mention, there is also the Empress of the Great Zhou. Rumor has it that this person will have 10 women every night and won't get up until late in the morning. Li Mu said angrily, "Slander, this is pure slander." Hu Jiu looked at him strangely and asked, "Why are you so agitated?" Li Mu said angrily, "Which spy provided this false information?" If Li Mu really followed the Empress of the Great Zhou, how could the Empress allow him to have an affair with other women? This information is obviously false. That spy is too irresponsible. If he acted rashly based on this false information, wouldn't he be letting our sisters of the Meizong sect walk into a trap? After thinking deeply, Hu Jiu said, "What you said makes sense. That Li Mu seducing the Empress of the Great Zhou may be false, but it must be true that he is easily fascinated by women. Is it possible to win him over through the woman beside him?" Chapter 438. Li Mu returned to his room unhappily. He didn't expect his reputation to be ruined by the spies of the Meizong sect. What surprised him even more was that the spies of the Meizong sect could find out so many secrets. Xiaobai didn't have any demonic aura on her body. How did they know that she was a fox? The palace gates were closed at night. Li Mu, Wan, and Xiaobai lived in the palace. Only a few palace maids near Changle Palace knew that there were people from the Meizong sect among them. Li Mu didn't rush to inform the Empress. He detained 1,000 Fox City last night. Perhaps the powerhouses of the Meizong sect didn't have time to notice him, but it might not be the case today. Although he joined the Meizong sect because they invited him, the Meizong sect was too trusting of him. They seemed to trust him, but they might have secretly begun to monitor his every move. The jade talisman that the Empress gave him and the fulu that Li Mu drew to shield himself from the mysteries of heaven had been put away by him long ago. These things could be used to shield the mysteries of heaven to prevent others from prying. Using them here meant that he didn't want to expose himself fast enough. Even powerhouses above the 6th realm couldn't spy on a small snake demon in human form. Wasn't that just giving away 300 taels of silver? After returning to his room, Li Mu did not do anything superfluous. He sat cross-legged on his bed, took out a piece of spirit jade, held it in his hand, and began to draw qi to cultivate. He sat there until night fell. Just after midnight, the spiritual jade in Li Mu's hand turned into powder. With the strength of a transformed demon, it would take about this long to absorb a spiritual jade. After that, he got out of bed and stretched for a while. He drank a glass of water and then went to bed again. On the highest mountain in 1,000 Fox City, in a cave on the mountain, a man who looked similar to Huan Ji waved his hand and dispersed the dark light technique. He said, "This demon should be fine." Huan Ji nodded and said, "Then I'll use it without worry." The man said, "His appearance can be considered outstanding, but it's a pity that he's a demon. It would be great if he was a human. If we need him in the future, we'll have to wash his demon body. How troublesome. They're my people. Don't tell them what to do." Phantom Princess frowned and said, "What about those heretical cultivation cultivators?" A trace of killing intent appeared in the man's eyes as he said, "Kill them. How many of our compatriots have died at their hands because they have been humiliated? One day, I will kill all of these damned humans." The next morning, Li Mu learned from Hu Jiu that the 5 human heretical cultivation practitioners had been publicly executed in the 1,000 Fox Nation. Human beings hated heretical cultivation, and demons hated heretical cultivation even more than human beings did. Due to the prestige of the Great Zhou court, heretical cultivation was still somewhat afraid of taking the lives of the people of Great Zhou. They were afraid of alarming the Department of Worship, so they didn't dare to wantonly cause harm. But they didn't have to worry about demons. The Great Zhou court wouldn't protect the demons, and the demon nation was a mass of scattered sand. There was nothing to be afraid of. Therefore, a large number of heretical cultivation practitioners hunted and killed demons everywhere. They extracted the souls of low-level demons, seized the inner cores of mid-level demons, and transformed into good-looking demons. Regardless of gender, they were sold to the black market to provide for certain customers with special requirements to visit prostitutes. This had even formed a huge black industry chain. Countless demons suffered from it and hated this kind of heretical cultivation, especially the Fox clan, because after transforming, the males were handsome and the females were beautiful. They were the focus of heretical cultivation. Although the major righteous sects restrained their disciples from doing such inhumane things, they were the same as the court and wouldn't stand up for the demons. When they returned home, Hujio looked seriously at Limu and said, "Little snake, you have to remember to stay away from humans. Don't be deceived by their flowery words. Some people like a tender and handsome little demon like you the most." Limu shivered and said, "I will be careful." "Thank you, Brother Hujio." Hujio patted his shoulder and said, "We're all on the same side. Don't be so polite. By the way, you just entered the Maison sect and are still too weak to go out with us to carry out missions. Tonight, you will be on guard duty in front of Miss Illusion Princess's courtyard. When dawn comes, someone will come to replace you." Limu nodded and said, "I know." It was late at night, and the moonlight was bright. Limu stood at the door of Illusion Princess's courtyard with his sword in his hands. He was the second-generation disciple of the Fulu school, the future headmaster, the controller of the Department of Consecration in the Great Zhou, the deputy commander of the internal guards, and the close minister of the Empress. Yet, he was guarding the door of a fox demon. Limu didn't plan to be like the spies of the Maison sect and completely forget their identities. He had hidden for 20 years and climbed up step by step without leaving any traces. He felt that 2 months was too long. But now, he could only guard the door here. If this went on, when could he reach the top of the Maison sect, comprehend the heavenly book of the Fox clan, and steal the secrets of the Maison sect? Now, he was still a little demon at the bottom of the Maison sect. Illusion Princess wouldn't even look at him. He had to do something to show his value and attract Illusion Princess's attention. It only took half a month for the little snake demon who had joined Maison sect not long ago to become familiar with him and then to trust him. Although he didn't make much contribution to Maison sect, compared with those guys who wanted to escape first when they encountered a task, this timid snake demon took the initiative to follow them every time. He completed many tasks with them and saved many of his compatriots of the demon clan who had fallen into the hands of heretical cultivation. Although he wasn't strong, his spiritual sense was naturally sharp. He reminded them many times in advance and saved them a lot of trouble. He also won the trust of the demons because of this. In the process of carrying out tasks, they would take the initiative to take care of him. They had already regarded him as one of their own. In Phantom Princess Mansion, Limu opened the door and saw Hujio standing outside. He asked, "Brother Hujio, is there another task?" Hujio shook her head and said, "You told me not long ago to be careful. During this period of time, you took risks and carried out tasks more diligently than anyone else." Limu's face was solemn as he said, "I'm just a little demon. I don't know when I'll be captured by humans and forced to sleep with old women. It's Lord Huanji who gave me everything I have now. I want to repay Lord Huanji." Hujio looked satisfied and said, "Very good. Lord Phantom Princess didn't misjudge you." He took out a jade bottle and handed it to Limu. He said, "Lord Phantom Princess gave this to you." Limu took the jade bottle and asked, "What is this?" Hujio said, "This is the demon core of a snake demon who just stepped into the 5th realm. We took it back from human heretical cultivation. Lord Phantom Princess has seen your recent performance. This is her reward for you. After refining this demon core, you should be able to advance to the 4th realm." Limu's face revealed an excited expression as he hurriedly said, "Many thanks, Lord Huanji." Hujio patted his shoulder and said, "Work hard. If you can successfully advance, I will propose to Lord Phantom Princess to let you become her personal guard." Limu held the jade bottle and said firmly, "Don't worry, Brother Hujio. I will work hard." Looking at Hujio's back, Li Mu closed the door and let out a sigh of relief. During this period of time, with his positive performance, he finally attracted some of Phantom Princess's attention. But it was far from enough to get close to the heavenly book. His next goal was to become her personal guard and gain her complete trust. 3 days later, beside the fake mountain, Phantom Princess was practicing with the stone statue. She suddenly turned her head and looked in a certain direction. A fourth realm demon energy rushed into the sky. Behind her, Hujio smiled and said, "Lord Phantom Princess, he broke through. Do you want to promote him to your personal guard?" Phantom Princess looked away and said, "Let's wait and see." Chapter 439. In the room, Li Mu retracted the demonic aura that he deliberately emitted. He kept the snake demon pill that Phantom Princess gave him. He planned to give it to his 2 nieces in the future. As long as he converted more of his own Dharma power, he could create the illusion that he had broken through. Not long after, Hujio walked into the courtyard and said regretfully, "Although you can't become Lord Illusion Princess personal guard right now, I believe that Lord Illusion Princess will agree soon." Li Mu was slightly disappointed. What Hujio meant was that he was not qualified to become Phantom Princess's guard now. Phantom Princess had 20 guards who were her true confidants. If he wanted to get close to her and get the chance to comprehend the heavenly book, he had to become her confidant first. There was no faster way to get close to her than to become her guard. He was already qualified to become her guard as he was at the 4th realm. However, Phantom Princess obviously did not agree. If he wanted to get close to her, Li Mu had to work harder. Hujio seemed to see Li Mu's disappointment. She reached out and gave him a bear hug. She said, "Don't be discouraged. You've only been in Maison for half a month. Work hard. There will be plenty of opportunities in the future." Li Mu said, "Thank you, Brother Hujio. I will." Although they were on different sides, after half a month of interaction, Li Mu, as a snake demon, had already built a deep friendship with the people around Phantom Princess. One had to admit that the atmosphere in Maison was very good. It was even better than the Imperial Court. When Li Mu was in Fairy's capital, the people around him greeted him with smiles on the surface. However, they were scheming and backstabbing behind his back. They wanted to kill him. However, in Maison, perhaps because everyone was good-looking, the atmosphere was very harmonious. They supported and helped each other. When facing enemies, they cooperated sincerely. They could even leave their backs to each other, especially Hujio. From the beginning, she took good care of Li Mu. She brought him quickly to familiarize himself with everything here. She was his guide in Maison. They met by chance. Li Mu was surprised that Hujio was so nice to him. After they hugged each other deeply, Hujio comforted Li Mu with a few more words before she turned around and left. Li Mu was about to return to his room when he saw a small demon looking at him strangely from the door of another room. This demon was also a fox demon, but she was not from Maison. Instead, she was a servant of Phantom Princess Manor. There were a total of 4 rooms in this small courtyard. Other than Li Mu, the other 3 demons were all servants of the manor. Li Mu glanced at the little demon and asked, "What are you looking at?" The little demon immediately shook his head and said, "No, nothing." The little demon wanted to return to his room immediately, but Li Mu said in a deep voice, "Come back." Little demon immediately stopped in his tracks. He was just a little demon in human form. His identity could not be compared to the experts of Maison. Li Mu looked at him and asked, "What did you want to say?" The little demon no longer dared to feign ignorance. He lowered his head and whispered, "Everyone knows that Lord Nine doesn't like women." Li Mu was dumbfounded. What? At this moment, the mystery that had been in his heart for many days was solved. No wonder Hujio repeatedly praised him for his good looks. No wonder Hujio took care of him so much. He thought that Hujio was just warm-hearted and helpful. Everyone knew that Hujio didn't like women, but he didn't. After learning this news, he thought carefully. It seemed that Hujio's words to him these days were full of hints. Li Mu stood there in a daze. He had never been so speechless in his life. After coming to his senses, he didn't dare to stay in the manor anymore. When he walked out of Phantom Princess Manor, he didn't expect to run into Hu Jio. Hu Jio asked, "Little snake, where are you going?" Li Mu had nowhere to hide. He said awkwardly, "I'm going to take a bath." Hu Jio said regretfully, "It's a pity that we have to go out. Otherwise, I would go with you." Li Mu asked, "Is there another mission?" Hu Jio said, "This mission is very dangerous. You don't have to go. When I come back, I'll take you to take a bath together." Li Mu originally wanted to participate in more missions and make more contributions so that he could become Phantom Princess's guard as soon as possible. But when he thought of Hu Jio and that he had more important things to do, he gave up the idea and said, "We'll talk about it when we have the chance." He waved to Hu Jio and strode away. The Fox clan was probably the demon clan that knew how to enjoy life the most. Their IQ was not inferior to that of humans, and they liked to live in human society. The construction of Thousand Fox City was not worse than that of any county in the Great Zhou, and the entertainment venues in the city were even better. At least, Li Mu had never seen such a magnificent bathhouse in Luoyang. Li Mu walked into the bathhouse. In the bathhouse, a beautiful fox demon saw Li Mu's clothes and the badge on his waist. She immediately put on a smile and said, "My lord, welcome to my shop." Li Mu put down a Fox Nation coin made of spiritual jade and said, "Prepare a single room for me." The beautiful fox demon said with a smile, "Do you want 2 girls to massage your shoulders and back?" Li Mu said indifferently, "There's no need for that. Just prepare a private bath." The service in the bathhouse was very good. Seeing that Li Mu didn't want to talk, the beautiful fox demon didn't say anything more. Soon, she asked someone to prepare a single room with a bath for him. The room was steaming hot. The hot water was poured on the hot stones, creating a thick mist that soon spread throughout the room. Although it had been half a month since he came here, Li Mu still didn't let down his guard. He didn't know if the masters of Meizong's sect were still spying on him. Even if they were, they wouldn't peek at him taking a bath. Besides, it was steaming here. The mystic light technique could spy on him, but it couldn't remove the fog. Even if someone was spying on him, they wouldn't see anything. Li Mu took off his clothes and walked into the bath. On the highest peak of Thousand Fox City, the handsome man looked at a blurry figure on the screen with admiration. He said, "I didn't expect this demon to have other strong points other than being handsome. Nurture him well. He'll be useful in the future." Huanji hurriedly turned around and used her mana to disrupt the mystic light technique. She said with disdain, "When did you become like Hu Jio?" The handsome man looked at her and said, "You're not young anymore. It's time to think about marriage. I think Bai Xian is good." Huanji waved her hand and said impatiently, "Don't mention him to me. It's so annoying. He's not even as good as me. How can he be my husband?" The handsome man said helplessly, "You're a rare genius of our fox tribe. Isn't it difficult for people of the same age to reach your level?" Huanji snorted and said, "This isn't an excuse for them to be weak." At this moment, a figure appeared in her mind. Before meeting Li Mu, Huanji thought she was the strongest among people of the same age, except for the one in the Great Zhou Divine Capital. After meeting Li Mu, her self-confidence suffered a huge blow. These days, she worked even harder to cultivate so that one day she could avenge the humiliation she had suffered. Thinking of Li Mu, Huanji's heart was filled with anger. She said, "I'll go back first. All right, that statue. Get someone to carve another one for me and send it to my residence." Li Mu was lying comfortably in the bath alone, but he wasn't in the mood to enjoy it. The undercover life of the Meizong sect was much harder than he thought. It had been half a month, and he still hadn't gained Huanji's trust. The only change was that Huanji didn't look at him directly. She would occasionally look at him directly. If this continued, he would have to stay here for 3 to 5 years to achieve his goal. This was something Li Mu couldn't accept. He had to think of another way. Li Mu didn't have much experience in winning a woman's trust. Usually, the simplest way was, of course, seduction. However, there was no lack of handsome men and beautiful women in Thousand Fox Country. Even Hu Jio was handsome. Someone like Old Zhang would be discovered as soon as he sneaked into Thousand Fox Country. There was no chance for him to be an undercover in the Meizong sect. With such people around him, Huan Ji couldn't be seduced. Li Mu wouldn't sacrifice his body for the mission. If he wanted to quickly climb up the ranks, he had to rely on other methods. When the fog in a room rose to a limit, Li Mu quietly set up a soundproof array. He took out the spirit snail and whispered, "Your Majesty." Soon, the Empress's voice came from the spirit snail. "Are you coming back?" Li Mu could hear the anticipation in her voice, but he could only say helplessly, "It might take a long time. I don't have much time, so I can only make it short. There are spies from the Meizong sect in the palace. It's very likely that they're palace maids near Chang'e Palace. Your Majesty can pay more attention, but it's best not to alert them." "I understand. Be careful when you're there alone. Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. It's not convenient to talk here. I'll hang up first." In Chang'e Palace, there had been no sound from the spirit snail for a long time. He was still holding it and didn't put it down for a long time. Lady Zhu, dressed in black, stood in the hall with a face full of shame. If only one of her spies was half as capable as Li Mu. Such an extremely dangerous task wouldn't be done by Her Majesty's favorite subject. Yao Country, Thousand Fox City. When Li Mu left the bathhouse and returned to his courtyard in Huanji Manor, he saw a figure standing in the courtyard. It seemed that she had been waiting for a long time. Li Mu quickly walked over and bowed. "Greetings, Lady Huanji." Huanji looked at him and thought of the scene in the mystic light technique. Her expression was slightly unnatural, but she quickly calmed down and asked, "Where did you go?" Li Mu said honestly, "I went to the bathhouse to take a bath." "Lady Huanji, do you have any orders?" Huanji said indifferently, "It's not a big deal. I'm still lacking a poison for refining pills. Squeeze some of your poison for me." Chapter 440. Seeing that Li Mu didn't respond for a long time, Phantom Princess asked, "What's wrong? You don't want to?" Li Mu hurriedly said, "Master Phantom Princess, you misunderstood me. I owe you a great favor. I can give you everything, but..." Phantom Princess asked, "But what?" Li Mu explained, "But not all snakes are poisonous. I happen to be the kind that is not poisonous. I can't squeeze out any venom. Why didn't you say so earlier?" Phantom Princess glanced at him and left in disappointment. Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. He was pretending. Even if Phantom Princess squeezed him dry, she couldn't squeeze out a drop of venom. The life of a spy was indeed full of danger. If he was careless, he would be exposed. In the past night, Li Mu didn't sleep well. He wasn't worried about being exposed, but he was thinking about how to tell Hu Jio tactfully that he always liked women with big breasts and big butts. No matter how beautiful a man was, he wouldn't change his preference. It would be offensive and strange if he said it directly, but he was afraid that Hu Jio wouldn't understand if he said it tactfully. Should he invite her to the brothel in the city? Some female monsters in the city didn't mind selling their bodies in order to get cultivation resources because they didn't have high cultivation talent. They were willing to do it, and it was legal in the Thousand Fox country. If he invited Hu Jio to such a place, she should understand what he meant. No, he was still pretending to be an innocent Xiaobai snake. His purpose was to get close to Phantom Princess. Doing this kind of thing might reduce his impression in Phantom Princess's mind. It was completely ignoring the essentials. After thinking for a whole night, Li Mu decided to remind her secretly. After Li Mu got out of bed, he had just finished washing up when the dull sound of a bell suddenly came from outside. It was the signal for the Meizong sect to gather everyone. Li Mu quickly walked out of the yard and came to the front yard. More than 10 figures had gathered in the yard. All of them looked gloomy. Li Mu didn't know what had happened. When he was about to ask Hu Jio, he glanced around the crowd and didn't see Hu Jio. The demons that followed Hu Jio on the mission yesterday had already returned, but Hu Jio was nowhere to be seen. Li Mu looked at a demon who went on a mission with Hu Jio yesterday and asked, "Where is Brother Hu Jio?" The fox monster lowered her head and said sadly, "We fell into the heretical cultivations trap. Brother Hu Jio stayed behind to cover our escape." Then, the fox demon did not continue, but someone else had already recounted the entire sequence of events. Meizong had obtained a lot of information about heretical cultivation by searching their souls after capturing the 5 heretical cultivation practitioners. With the intelligence, they had destroyed several nests of heretical cultivation and rescued dozens of their compatriots of the demon race in half a month. However, they were noticed by the heretical cultivation organizations, too. This time, the heretical cultivation organization had deliberately released false information to lure them into the trap, and then set up an ambush early on. If the demons had not smelled the danger in advance, perhaps none of them would have made it back this time. Even so, Hu Jio had sacrificed her life to create a chance for them to escape. Phantom Princess walked out from the backyard and said in a low voice, "Follow me." A fox monster stood out and said to Phantom Princess, "Lord Phantom Princess, this matter needs to be considered at length. The 5 heretical cultivation practitioners are all in the 5th realm. They're siblings from the same mother. When they work together, they can fight against 6th realm cultivators. If we go, we will only be courting death. Lord Phantom Princess, please reconsider. We can't let Master Hu Jio's sacrifice be in vain. We will take revenge sooner or later, but not now." Hearing everyone's advice, Phantom Princess took a deep breath and turned into a stream of light, flying to the highest mountain in Thousand Fox Country. Not long after, at the peak, the handsome man shook his head at Phantom Princess and said, "Father is in seclusion. I have to guard this place and can't leave. Moreover, you know the rules of the demon country. No matter what grudges the people below have, no matter how big the trouble is, cultivators in the 6th realm and above can't interfere. Once we break this rule, others can break it too. When that happens, this place will become chaotic again. More 5th realm and even 6th realm cultivators will die." Phantom Princess did not force it. She gritted her teeth and said, "Then I will go myself." The handsome man shook his head and said, "You can't go. You're not their match." Phantom Princess said, "I want to take revenge for Hu Jio." With that, she flew into the air and left. However, just as she flew into the air, her body stopped in the air, and she could not take another step forward. Phantom Princess said angrily, "Let me go." The handsome man shook his head and said, "I can't let you go. If anything happens to you, I won't be able to explain it to Father." He waved his hand, and Phantom Princess flew into the cave. The handsome man casually set up a formation and said, "Calm down inside first. When the time is right, I will let you take revenge for Hu Jio." "Let me out. Huan Yin, you bastard, let me out. Let me out. I curse you that you will never be able to marry a wife." Phantom Princess cursed loudly in the cave. The handsome man just shook his head helplessly and flew away. The news of Lady Hu Jio's death at the hands of the heretical cultivation quickly spread throughout Thousand Fox City. The demon citizens in the city were all filled with righteous indignation. Some of them were rescued by Hu Jio from the heretical cultivation. However, the news that came later made them even angrier. The heretical cultivation actually hung Lady Hu Jio's corpse on a mountain gate and let be exposed to the sun by the feng shui. This was a naked insult. For a moment, the citizens of Thousand Fox Country were furious. They wanted nothing more than to flatten the heretical cultivation, but Meizong did not do anything. Those evil cultivators were too powerful. If the first elder didn't show up, even if they went, they would only be sending themselves to their deaths. In the cave on the highest peak of Thousand Fox Country, Phantom Princess gritted her teeth. "I must kill them." At the entrance of the cave, a fox demon was telling her about the situation in Thousand Fox Country in the past 2 days. Then he remembered something and said, "There's one more thing that I don't dare to guess. I don't know if I should tell Lady Phantom Princess." Phantom Princess took a deep breath and said, "Speak." The fox demon said, "The snake demon we brought back last time has disappeared for 2 days. He should have left Thousand Fox City. He didn't tell anyone about this. Maybe he was afraid of death and ran away." Phantom Princess said coldly, "If he wants to leave, then leave. Meizong doesn't matter with him. The next time we meet, We will be enemies." The fox demon said indignantly. "This demon doesn't know how to repay kindness at all. If it wasn't for Lady Phantom Princess, he would still be a demon in human form. He might not be able to condense a demon core in this lifetime." Phantom Princess shook her head and said, "Don't mention him again. Think of a way to bring Hu Jio's corpse back." There was a look of humiliation in the fox demon's eyes, but he still sighed and said, "This is obviously bait. They insulted Hu Jio's body to lure us there. There must be a trap set up there, and they're waiting for us to come to them." The experts of the clan were killed, and their corpses were exposed. These days, Thousand Fox Country was extremely depressed. It had been a long time since the people from Meizong's sect showed a smile. Hu Jio was killed, and there was a traitor in the sect. The snake demon had joined Meizong for less than a month and escaped from Thousand Fox Country. This was the shame of Meizong in recent years. "I knew it. That snake demon is extremely cowardly. Who forced him to join the sect?" "It's Hu Jio. Hu Jio is silly. I know he took a fancy to the snake demon's beauty, but Meizong recruits not only based on beauty, but also character and temperament. A while ago, he was still pretending to be fearless. Now he has shown his true colors, right?" At the city gate of Thousand Fox City, the two experts of Meizong who guarded the city gate were still angry when they talked about the snake demon. At this moment, a figure slowly walked in from outside the city gate. It was a figure that was not tall. His clothes were tattered, and his body was covered in blood. He limped from afar. "Who is it?" "This is Thousand Fox Country." "Stop." The two experts of Meizong flew forward, but in the next moment, their expressions changed. At the city gate, the person was carrying something on his back. He wrapped a vine around his waist and connected it tightly to the thing on his back. The two quickly saw the thing on his back. It was a corpse. When they saw the face of the corpse, the two exclaimed again. "It's Hu Jio. Hu Jio's corpse." The figure walked over step by step. When he reached the city gate, he slowly raised his head. Under the blood, a handsome and delicate face was revealed. He smiled at the two and said in a hoarse voice, "I brought back brother Hu Jio's corpse." After saying that, he fell down. The two hurried forward to support him, their faces full of shock. "It's him. He didn't escape. He actually brought back Hu Jio's corpse. How did he do it?" The two hurried back to the city with a man and a corpse. Not long after, a piece of news from Meizong made the entire Thousand Fox Country boil. Master Hu Jio's corpse was brought back, and the person who brought it back was the little demon of Meizong who had defected for half a month. Soon, everyone understood that he did not defect. Everyone in Thousand Fox Country wanted to bring back Hu Jio's corpse, but no one took action because they knew that it was a trap that would kill whoever went. During these days, they could only condemn and condemn. However, there was a demon who left Thousand Fox Country alone without saying anything. Half a month later, when he returned again, he had already brought back Hu Jio's corpse and the dignity of Meizong and Thousand Fox Country. Although they did not know what happened in the past half a month, it was said that when the little demon carried Hu Jio's corpse back to Thousand Fox City, there were nearly 100 wounds of various sizes on his body. He was like a lamp that had run out of oil, and his life was hanging by a thread. If Lady Phantom Princess had not saved him with precious spirit pills, he would probably be dead now. That little snake demon caused a lot of discussion in the city. I want to apologize to him. A few days ago, I scolded him for defecting. What a good man. He's a true hero, a hero worthy of everyone's admiration. That lord even took a bath in our bathhouse. He looks handsome and charming, but I didn't expect him to be so courageous. In Phantom Princess Manor, countless figures stood in the courtyard. Many of their faces were still filled with disbelief. Unbelievable. Even the Grand Elder might not be able to escape unscathed from that place. How did a fourth realm little demon do it? I've never seen such serious injuries. What did he go through? He's still alive. What's supporting him? Everyone could not understand how a weak little demon could do such a big thing that even a sixth realm powerhouse would not be able to do easily. What happened in between? In the room, Li Mu opened his eyes and looked at the figure standing in front of the bed. He struggled to get up and said, Greetings, Lady Phantom Princess." Phantom Princess pressed his shoulder and pressed him back on the bed. She said, "You're seriously injured and need a rest. There's no need to salute." Then, she looked at Li Mu's face and asked, "How did you do it?" Li Mu's eyes were filled with sadness. He said, "Here, Brother Hugio was the person who treated me the best. I couldn't watch his body be humiliated after he died. So I used the snake race's concealment technique and hid in front of the heretical cultivation for half a month before the 5 heretical cultivation powerhouses left." Phantom Princess shook her head and said, "Even so, you couldn't have gotten Hugio's body." Li Mu said, "I knew that there must be an ambush around Big Brother Hugio's body. If I fought head-on, I would be courting death, so I could only use my wits. Therefore, an hour after the 5 evil cultivators left, I changed into one of their appearances and tricked their subordinates into putting down Big Brother Hugio's body. Unfortunately, I was still discovered in the end. It wasn't easy for me to kill my way out. Fortunately, after the 5 evil cultivators left, there were no more 5th realm cultivators. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to see Lord Phantom Princess." Phantom Princess blurted out, "That's impossible. The transformation technique requires at least a 6th realm cultivation. Even I don't know it. You can't have the Fulu and pills to disguise yourself." Li Mu looked at her and said gratefully, "I have to thank Lady Phantom Princess. It was you who helped me reach the 4th realm. At the same time, I awakened a talent. Snakes don't have the ability to transform unless—" Phantom Princess looked at Li Mu with confusion. She quickly thought of something and said, "You have the bloodline of the lizard race?" Li Mu nodded and said, "My grandmother is from the lizard race." The lizard race was known as the 4-legged snake. The snake race and the lizard race often intermarried. Phantom Princess was no longer confused and said, "You shouldn't have acted on your own." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Even you were imprisoned. If I said that I was going to bring back Brother Hugio's body, I definitely wouldn't have been allowed." Phantom Princess asked, "Are you willing to give up your life for Brother Hugio's body?" Li Mu smiled and said, "My father told me that there are things that I shouldn't do in my life. I can't let Brother Hugio be humiliated because I'm afraid of death." His injuries were almost healed. Not even a scar could be seen on his body. During these 3 days, he had cute little fox demons serving him. These little fox demons that had just transformed looked at him with stars in their eyes. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, a little fox demon walked in and looked at Li Mu with admiration. She said softly, "Sir, Lord Phantom Princess invites you over." Li Mu got out of bed for the first time in 3 days and came to Phantom Princess's courtyard. In the courtyard, Phantom Princess sized up Li Mu and asked, "How's your recovery?" Li Mu cupped his fists and said, "It's almost done. Thank you for the elixir." Phantom Princess nodded and said, "Although you carried Hugio's body back and made a great contribution, there are still many people in the sect who don't believe you can do it. So, I need you to show me your abilities. As long as you can prove that what you said is true, I won't let anyone who dares to criticize you go easily." Li Mu had already expected this and was not afraid. He used his sleeve to cover his face. After a moment, when he moved his sleeve away, he had already turned into Hugio. Phantom Princess revealed a strange expression and said, "In a certain demon race, there's only 1 in 10,000 people who can awaken this level of innate ability. You're the first one I have seen." Actually, the innate abilities of the various demon races were not that hard to awaken. It was just that they did not know the method. If they knew the method, humans could also use demon techniques, but it was not as easy as the demon race. Li Mu changed back and looked at Phantom Princess and asked, "Lord Phantom Princess, is it done?" Phantom Princess nodded and said, "You can go back." Li Mu let out a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to leave, Phantom Princess suddenly thought of something and said, "Wait." Li Mu turned his head and asked, "Lord Phantom Princess, is there anything else?" Phantom Princess thought for a moment and pointed at the statue that was filled with sword marks beside the fake mountain and said, "Change into him for me to see." Li Mu looked at the statue and swallowed his saliva. He said softly, "Lord Phantom Princess, I have never seen him before. I'm afraid I can't change." Phantom Princess crossed her arms and said, "No problem, you can change." Li Mu probed, "Then I will try." Phantom Princess nodded and said, "Let's begin." Li Mu covered his face with his sleeve again. After a moment, he slowly moved his sleeve away. Phantom Princess walked over step by step and examined him for a long time. Finally, she stretched out her hand and patted his face. She pulled it and revealed a meaningful smile and said, "Good, very good." Li Mu's face was pale and filled with fear. He said with a trembling voice, Lord Phantom Princess, don't be like this." Phantom Princess looked at this familiar face, and a certain image appeared in her mind. She couldn't help but curl up her lips and reveal a smile that could charm all living things. She said, "From now on, you can follow me." This means that Li Mu is already her personal guard, and also her personal guard. Li Mu has taken a big step towards his final goal. He revealed a happy expression and said, "Thank you, Lord Phantom Princess." Phantom Princess thought for a moment and said, "I'll change your name. I'll call you that from now on." Li Mu bowed and said, "This subordinate will follow Lord Phantom Princess's arrangement." Phantom Princess pinched his face again and said, "Remember, from now on, you'll be called Li Mu." Just thinking about the process would send chills down the spines of those who were timid. In Li Mu's new residence, Hujio floated in the air. She looked at Li Mu emotionally and said, "Little snake, I used to think you were timid and afraid of death. I want to apologize to you. You're a real tough guy, different from those pretty Xiaobai guys." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "I'm back now. In fact, I'm also afraid of death. So when I do things, I plan carefully. We snakes are cold-blooded and are born to be stealthy. The forest is my territory. If they dare to come in, they'll die." Hujio sighed and asked, "So it's really not because of love?" Li Mu also said seriously, "I still like beautiful women. It won't change in my life." Hujio said, "Who do you like? Tell me, and I'll give up completely." Li Mu shook his head and said, "I can't tell you." Hujio thought for a moment and suddenly said, "Is it Miss Phantom Princess?" Li Mu didn't deny it and said, "Big brother Hujio, please help me keep it a secret." Hujio sighed and said, "I knew it. Meizong sect, Thousand Fox City, no, the entire demon nation, as long as they're capable, they don't like Miss Phantom Princess. But your love is destined to be fruitless. Unless you can capture Li Mu alive and bring him to Miss Phantom Princess and become the personal disciple of the Heavenly Monarch, then you'll have a chance." Li Mu clenched his fist and said, "I'll work hard." Hujio left in disappointment. Li Mu closed the door and lay on the bed. Any female, no matter if she was a woman or a female demon, would find it hard to hate someone who liked her, even if she didn't like them. Not to mention someone like him who was handsome and loyal. In order to complete the mission earlier, Li Mu had to use all means to win Miss Phantom's favor. After lying down for a while, Miss Phantom's voice came from outside. "Li Mu, come here." Li Mu didn't move immediately. Instead, he waited for Miss Phantom to call him 3 times before he walked out of the room. He flew over the wall and landed in another courtyard. Miss Phantom frowned and asked, "What are you doing in the room? I've called you 3 times." Li Mu said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Miss Phantom. I haven't gotten used to this new name and didn't react immediately." Miss Phantom said, "Get used to it slowly." She threw a token to Li Mu and said, "From now on, you're my personal guard. Wherever I go, you follow." Li Mu stood with his chest out and said, "Yes." Miss Phantom said again, "Also, before you see me, you have to turn into that statue." Li Mu touched his head and asked in confusion, "Why?" Miss Phantom said indifferently, "There's no why. You just have to listen." Li Mu didn't say anything else. He used his sleeves to wipe his face and quickly turned into another face. Miss Phantom sized him up and waved her hand in the air. Li Mu's projection appeared in front of him. Miss Phantom said, there's still a bit of difference. Although the appearance was different, the feeling that the person gave them was definitely not wrong. The heretical cultivation group quickly recognized that the person in front of them was the terrifying existence who barged into their base alone not long ago, snatched the fox demon's corpse, and killed more than 10 of their brothers along the way. After realizing this, the heretical cultivation group, that was abnormally fierce, immediately retreated in fear. Li Mu was about to give chase when he suddenly stopped in his tracks. He raised his eyebrows, and a surprised expression appeared on his face. Then a powerful aura exploded from the ground. Judging from this aura, it was actually another 5th Realm expert, and his strength should be at the peak of 5th Realm. His cultivation was much higher than Phantom Princess's. Then the ground cracked open somewhere, and a figure broke through the air. When he saw that figure, Li Mu was stunned. This person's appearance was exactly the same as the 5 leaders of this heretical cultivation organization. In the sky, the experts of the 2 sects were stunned and immediately revealed shocked expressions. Why is there another one? Oh no, there's 6 brothers. Damn it, it's a trap. That elder did not help the other 5. Instead, he looked at Li Mu with a sinister gaze and gritted his teeth. So it's you. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure had already disappeared from the spot. Li Mu did not hesitate to slap a Fulu note on himself and escape into the distance. Where he originally stood, the elder's skinny hand reached out. If Li Mu was still there, his hand would have pierced through his heart. You can't escape. The elder's attack did not succeed. He coldly snorted and chased after Li Mu. In the sky, Phantom Princess's expression changed. Just as she was about to chase after him, an elder blocked her and sneered. Little beauty, it's already like this, and you're still thinking about others. Take care of yourself first, Phantom Princess coldly said. Scram. The elder did not reply, but his attacks became even fiercer. Phantom Princess coldly looked at him and crushed a jade talisman in her hand. Suddenly, a shadow appeared behind her. It was a huge scarlet fox. The scarlet fox shadow was 1,000 feet long and had 7 tails behind it. After the scarlet fox shadow appeared, entered Phantom Princess's body. The 5 elders looked at Phantom Princess, who was emitting a terrifying aura, with fear in their eyes. They suddenly had a feeling that a great disaster was about to befall them. At the same time, in the forest, a figure was quickly escaping. Behind him, a stream of light was chasing closely. The distance between the two was constantly closing. Let me see how long your Fulu can last. You dare to kill my disciple. In a moment, I will extract your soul and refine your body into a corpse. I won't kill your soul. A fox demon who was rescued said indignantly, "Why should we care about these humans? Let them stay here and perish on their own." Huanji glanced at him and said, "You should hate those people from the heretical cultivation. They're the same as you." The fox demon's throat moved, but he didn't say anything in the end. Huanji lent Hu Jiao a flask magic treasure. After putting the human women into the magic treasure, Hu Jiao and Li Mu flew to Jiujiang County. Li Mu was silent along the way. Hu Jiao asked, "Do you think Lord Huanji is too kind to the humans?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Yes." Hu Jiao looked at him and said, "These humans didn't do anything wrong. They are also victims." Those humans said that the demon clan is cruel and bloodthirsty. If we do that, wouldn't it be the same as what they said? Li Mu thought about it and asked, "Since we don't hate humans, why do we have so many spies in the Great Zhou and go against the Imperial Court?" Hu Jiao snorted and said, "What bullsh asterisk T Imperial Court? What do we Demon Clan do wrong to be treated like this by humans? The Imperial Court allowed humans to kill us wantonly and take our souls. When we wanted revenge, the imperial court sent out masters to kill us. If we want fairness, we have to overthrow them and establish our own imperial court. Li Mu was speechless after hearing Hu Jio's words. If he was really a snake demon and suffered such unfair treatment, he would also want to overthrow the Great Zhou court. But he wasn't. Li Mu sighed deeply. After a long time, he said, I don't know how many spies the Meizong sect has in the imperial court. When can we overthrow them and establish our own imperial court? Hu Jio sighed and said, when Shui Ming was alive, we could even directly influence some of the decisions of the Great Zhou court. We also took the opportunity to plant many spies in internal guards of the Great Zhou Empress. Unfortunately, after Shui Ming's death, the internal guards were also purged. Our influence on the Great Zhou court is much smaller. Speaking of this, she looked at Li Mu again and said, this is all because of Li Mu, the empress of the Great Zhou Empress. He destroyed at least 10 years of the Meizong sect's plan. So the Lord of Heaven gave him such a generous reward. Lord Huanji also suffered a few losses in his hands, so she changed your name and let you become him. She usually beats you to vent her anger. You have to behave well and make her happy. Li Mu said helplessly, I know, he snorted and said, it's all that damn Li Mu's fault. If it weren't for him, we could still directly influence the Great Zhou court. Now in their imperial court, we shouldn't have such a high-ranking spy, right? Hu Jio smiled proudly and said, who said we don't? Li Mu asked curiously, who is it? Hu Jio shook her head and said, I can't say this. This is the rule of the Meizong sect. Li Mu said unhappily, Brother Hu Jio, don't you trust me? Hu Jio said, of course I trust you, but this is a secret of our sect. Even the people of the Meizong sect can't reveal it to each other. Li Mu said disappointedly, then I won't ask. I know that I'm too inexperienced and you don't trust me. These secrets are not something I can inquire about. Hu Jio hurriedly said, don't think like that. Everyone, including Master Huanji, trusts you very much. Otherwise, why would Master Huanji let you be her personal guard and take you with her every mission? Li Mu shook his head and said, Brother Hu Jio, you don't have to say any more. I will adjust my position in the future. I won't say anything that I shouldn't say, and I won't ask anything that I shouldn't ask. Hu Jio was a little anxious and said, Okay, I'll tell you one. Princess Yinyang of the Shao royal family, Shui Ming's former wife, is one of us now. I really can't say anything else. The two entered Jiujiang County City and left the human women in an alley. Then Hu Jio sent a message to the Jiujiang County government. The two hid in the dark and saw a group of constables rushing out of the county government. When they found the place where the women were, they left Jiujiang County City. On the way back to Qinhu City, Li Mu still didn't say a word. At this moment, he was conflicted. Hu Jio and the people of the Meizong sect really treated him as one of their own, especially Hu Jio. She took care of Li Mu as much as Li Qing did at that time. But Li Mu was using their trust to secretly plot against them and get information from them. This made Li Mu feel complicated, and he couldn't calm down for a long time. If he was already like this, how would those who had been undercover for so many years, even getting married and having children in other places in order to gain trust, feel? What kind of feelings would they have? Hu Jio noticed Li Mu's silence and asked, Are you still angry with me? Li Mu shook his head and said, No, I just feel that I'm not a human. Hu Jio smiled and said, What are you talking about? You're not a human. After completing the mission perfectly and returning to Qinhu City, Li Mu soon heard Huanji's summons. He came to Huanji's courtyard and asked, Lord Huanji, what can I do for you? Two long whips appeared in Huanji's hands, and she said, Let me see if you've made any progress these days. Li Mu didn't say a word and drew his sword at Huanji as usual. Since there were some things that couldn't be resisted, she should learn to enjoy it. At least when Li Mu betrayed her in the future, he would feel less guilty in his heart. Huanji waved the whips in her hands and gradually slowed down. When she had ravaged him in the past, there had been humiliation and unwillingness on his face. Seeing this hateful face revealing humiliation and unwillingness in front of her, her heart was incomparably carefree. Even the knot in her heart had been untied recently. Chapter 444. Illusion Princess Manor. A woman was chained up, and her magic power was sealed. Hu Jio flew around her and said coldly, "I knew that the great Zhou court wouldn't be honest. You really have spies. Tell me, who else are your accomplices? Where are they?" The people from Maison were glaring at her from the side. The woman looked straight ahead and said lightly, "I have no accomplices. You can kill me or torture me as you wish." Li Mu was also standing in the crowd. He looked angry, but he felt helpless. He knew that the imperial court had spies in the demon country and the demon sect. The Zhu Wei was the Empress's intelligence organization. They were the ones who spread the news about the White Emperor's cave abode. This woman should be from the Zhu Wei. The reason why she was caught was because the people of Maisong's sect found her suspicious. Later, when she left, they entered the room to search. Sure enough, they found the communication magic treasure that she used to contact her superiors. Thus, she was captured by the people of Maisong's sect. An expert from Maisong's sect threatened, "It's not that easy to die. If you want to have a complete corpse, you'd better confess your accomplices. Otherwise, you'll know what it means to beg for death but not be able to." The woman sneered and said, "I really want to know." The strong cultivator looked at Illusion Princess and said, "Master, this woman is too stubborn. She won't confess without torture." Illusion Princess raised her hand and said, "Lock her up first." The spy was taken away. Illusion Princess ordered the others, "You guys keep an eye on her. She must have accomplices in Thousand Fox City. They will most likely come to save her. If they don't, it won't be too late to torture her." Everyone praised in unison, "Master Illusion Princess is brilliant." Illusion Princess added, "Send another order to Maisong's sect. Tell everyone to pay close attention to the strange people in the city. If they find anything, report it immediately." After a while, Li Mu walked out of Illusion Princess Manor slowly. The people from the Zhu Wei were the Empress's people. How could Li Mu not save the Empress's people? However, he could not break into the prison directly. He had more important things to do here. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he could not expose himself. If he wanted to save someone, he would do it in a roundabout way. Hu Jio floated behind him and asked, "Little snake, where are you going?" "Li Mu, go take a bath." A Maison expert said, "This kid knows how to enjoy life more and more." Hu Jio sighed. "It's a pity that I lost my body. Otherwise, we could soak together, Chengel Palace." Mr. Mei, Shangguan Li, and Zhu Wei, who was already dressed in black, stood in the hall. The atmosphere was somber. The spies of the Zhu Wei in the Thousand Fox country had just sent news that a spy had fallen into the hands of the Maison sect. Then, they found a demon sect spy in Princess Yunyang's residence and found evidence of Princess Yunyang's collusion with the demon sect, which set off a huge wave. After Cui Ming, Princess Yunyang also colluded with the demon sect. The Shao royal family was terrified and hurriedly distanced themselves from Princess Yunyang. The Zhou faction also didn't let go of this opportunity and used these two matters to fiercely impeach the Shao royal family. After a long time, the new faction and the old faction once again erupted into fierce conflict. Li Mu, who was in Thousand Fox Nation, didn't know about this matter, and he felt a little melancholy. Because he liked to soak in baths, Huan Ji specially had someone build a bathhouse for him in his courtyard, and also prepared 2 little vixens for him to order around. This way, Li Mu had no reason to go out again. In Huan Ji's residence, Li Mu couldn't use the spiritual snail. There were too many strong people here, and it was very likely that he would be exposed. In other words, from now on, his only way of contacting the Empress was also cut off. After many days, Li Mu also figured out Huan Ji's methods. He didn't know if it was because she felt guilty, but the more she did things to Li Mu and ordered him around, the better she would treat Li Mu afterwards, as if it was a kind of compensation on this day. Li Mu was massaging Huan Ji's shoulders while listening to Hu Jiu's report. My lord, in these few days, there hasn't been anyone behaving strangely in the city, especially near the prison. There hasn't been any special situation, so they probably won't save anyone. Just as he finished speaking, someone hurried in and said with an ugly expression, My lord Huan Ji, someone from the Great Zhou court came, saying that they caught one of our spies in Chengdu and want to use her to exchange for that woman. Huan Ji frowned and asked, Which spy? That person gritted his teeth and said, It's Hu Lu. What? Huan Ji's expression finally changed. Hu Lu was a very important spy that they had planted in the Great Zhou imperial court. Ever since Cui Ming's death, she had taken the opportunity to bewitch and rope in Princess Yunyan. Apart from gathering information, she was also planning something big. Hu Lu was the best spy cultivated by the Meizong sect. Her mission in these few years was to hide and didn't do anything, so it was impossible for her to be exposed. The only possibility was that someone had leaked the information. Huan Ji's expression darkened and said, Only a few people know about this. Who leaked the information? Hu Jiu's expression also became serious and said, Could there be a spy among them? Huan Ji said in a low voice, Gather everyone who knows about this. Li Mu followed Hu Jiu out and said, Brother Hu Jiu, I know about this too. Hu Jiu waved her hand and said, I know it can't be you. How can you be a spy? Their leader, the Blue Wolf Demon King, was a seventh realm mystic demon that was no weaker than the Lord of Myriad Illusions. He had 4 sixth realm demon kings under his command. His strength was far beyond that of the Thousand Fox Nation. Because of his handsome appearance, Wolf San was chosen by the Meizong sect many years ago. He successfully went undercover in the Thousand Fox country and delivered a lot of information to the Wolf Demon clan. Although he was not the one who leaked the information about Hu Lu, he still could not pass Phantom Princess's second question. Wolf San had never imagined that after hiding in the Thousand Fox Nation for so long, successfully infiltrating the Meizong sect, and even becoming Phantom Princess's personal guard, he would fall for something that had nothing to do with him in the end. Hu Jiu materialized and kicked Wolf San nonstop. She scolded him as she kicked him. We treated you like a brother. How dare you betray us? Damn it. I told you to go undercover. I told you to go undercover. You ungrateful wolf cub. I shouldn't have saved you in the first place. Phantom Princess waved her hand, and Wolf San was taken away by 2 people. Her expression was still dark. Wolf San was not the one who leaked the information to the Great Zhou court. It was someone else. Who else knows about Hu Lu? Behind her, Li Mu raised his hand weakly and said softly, Lord Phantom Princess, there's still me. Phantom Princess was surprised. How did you know? Li Mu explained, Last time, Brother Hu Jiu accidentally mentioned it in front of me. Lord Phantom Princess, why don't you use the soul-searching technique on me? Phantom Princess thought for a moment and said to Li Mu, Look into my eyes. Li Mu looked into Phantom Princess's eyes and silently recited the mind-clearing technique. Phantom Princess's eyes became extremely deep. She asked 2 questions and got negative answers. No one was surprised. They didn't suspect him at all, not to mention his contributions to the Meizong sect. A spy would be too guilty to escape. How could Lord Phantom Princess take the initiative to question him? This was enough to explain everything. Hu Jiu was puzzled. Who could it be? Someone said, Could it be that Hu Lu accidentally exposed himself? That's the Great Zhou's divine capital. There are many strong people there. If he's not careful, he will be exposed. At this moment, the question of who leaked the news was no longer the most important question. The people sent by the Great Zhou court were already outside the Thousand Fox City. Phantom Princess needed to decide immediately whether to exchange the spy. Phantom Princess took a deep breath and said, Let him in. 15 minutes later, in the courtyard of Phantom Princess Mansion. Phantom Princess sat on a chair in the courtyard. Li Mu stood beside her. A thin old man with a short beard walked in from outside. Chapter 446. Looking at the ridiculous scene in front of him, Great Reverend Chin's breathing quickened, and the veins on his forehead throbbed. He couldn't watch anymore, so he closed his eyes and blocked his hearing. This little fox demon was really shameless to the extreme. If she had the ability, she should have fought with Lord Li. Why did she find a little demon that looked similar to him and shout at him? Who was she trying to disgust? Out of sight, out of mind. He patiently waited for the hostage exchange. Soon, Hu Jio brought a woman over. Great Reverend Chen opened his eyes again after sensing it with his spiritual perception. Hu Jio held the woman and asked, "Where's Hu Lu?" Great Reverend Chen waved his hand, and a figure appeared out of thin air. It was a seductive and beautiful woman, but her entire body was tied up, and her mouth was gagged with a piece of white cloth. After both sides exchanged hostages, Great Reverend Chun grabbed the woman's shoulder and left without looking at Phantom Princess again. On the highest peak of Thousand Fox City, a Mirage faction powerhouse asked a handsome man, "Great Elder, why didn't you capture this person? If everyone attacked together, he wouldn't be able to leave Thousand Fox City today." The handsome man shook his head and said, "When two countries are at war, they don't kill envoys. It's not difficult to capture him, but if the brothers and sisters of Meizong faction fall into the hands of others in the future, only death awaits." In the courtyard, Hu Jiu untied Hu Lu, removed the white claw from her mouth, and unlocked her magic power shackles. She quickly asked, "Sister Lu, are you all right?" Hu Lu spat a few times and said through gritted teeth, "I'm fine." Hu Jiu sighed and asked, "How did you suddenly get exposed?" Hu Lu said angrily, "How should I know? I hid well and was still waiting for an opportunity." Princess Yinyang's residence was suddenly surrounded by Great Zhou's Great Reverend's department. 2 sixth realms and more than a dozen fifth realms appeared in front of me. "What happened? Who leaked the news?" Hu Jiu shook her head and said, "We haven't found him yet, but you don't know that Wolf 13 is actually a spy from the Wolf tribe. You've misjudged him. Hu Lu might have returned safely, but this wasn't a good thing for Meizong faction. She was originally a spy with an important mission, but she was caught by the Great Zhou court and exchanged with a Great Zhou spy, causing Meizong sect to lose an important chess piece. In addition, they had yet to find out how Fox 6 information was leaked. In other words, Meizong sect had a spy with an unknown identity. They didn't know when he would give them another heavy blow. For a long period of time, many people in Meizong sect became nervous and wary of each other because of this incident. In the imperial study of Fairy's capital, Great Deacon Shun was reporting on his work. When he was drinking with Hu Jio and the others, he asked indirectly, "Brother Hu Jio, have any of you seen the Heavenly Tomes?" Hu Jio shook her head and said, "The Heavenly Tomes are the Heavenly Lord's treasures. How could we have seen them? In the past, only those who made great contributions had the chance to study them." Li Mu asked, "What's considered a great contribution?" Hu Jio said, "If you can take in those wolf cubs and make them subordinates of the Thousand Fox country, you'll definitely have the chance to study the Heavenly Tomes. Or, if you can save Phantom Princess once, the Heavenly Lord will probably let you study the Heavenly Tomes." Sixth Sister risked her life to save Phantom Princess when she was in danger. That's how she got the chance to study the Heavenly Tomes. Taking in the Wolf Demon Clan was expanding the territory. The Wolf Demon Clan was even stronger than the Thousand Fox country. Li Mu didn't have the ability to take them in. As for the hero saving the beauty, Phantom Princess herself was very powerful. It wasn't anyone's turn to save her. This was something that could only be chanced upon. Hu Jiu patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't be discouraged. There are other ways. If you have the chance in the future, if you can catch Li Mu, you can also study the Heavenly Tomes. As long as you can catch him, in addition to studying the Heavenly Tomes, you can also become the Heavenly Lord's disciple." The Heavenly Lord only has one disciple now. Li Mu drank a mouthful of wine. He also couldn't do this. Not to mention that he couldn't catch himself. In front of the Heaven Lord of Illusions, he might not be able to continue pretending as a snake demon. before the Heaven Lord of Illusions came out of seclusion. Comprehending the heavenly tomes and leaving this place was the safest way. Li Mu had already experienced the strength of a Seventh Realm expert. If the Empress hadn't arrived in time last time, he would have become Phantom Princess prisoner. Hu Jio asked why. Do you want to study the heavenly tomes? Li Mu glanced at her and said, didn't you say that studying the heavenly tomes is good for cultivation? My cultivation is too low. I want to improve. Hu Jio smiled and said, then you should serve Lord Phantom Princess well. Maybe one day, Lord Phantom Princess will be happy and give you the chance to study the heavenly tomes. Or, if you have the ability to make Lord Phantom Princess fall in love with you, you can have anything you want, let alone the heavenly tomes. At this moment, Li Mu missed Li Si very much. If he had Li Si by his side to advise him, it might not be impossible to take down Phantom Princess in a short time. Whether it was a pure young girl or a passionate young woman, Li Si had ways to deal with them. Phantom Princess, who had never experienced love, was the easiest to deceive. But thinking about it, he felt that he was paying too much. It was not worth it to lose his innocence for a page of the heavenly tomes. For Xiao Bai, he could temporarily put down his dignity, but there were still some bottom lines that couldn't be touched. Hu Jio gulped down a mouthful of wine. She put her arm around Li Mu's shoulder and said sadly, little snake, who do you think that damn spy is? Everyone knew that even though the Lord of Heaven had a son and a daughter, Lord Huanji was the one who received the true teachings of the Lord of Heaven. The Lord of Heaven had even passed down the heavenly book to her. Whoever could marry Huanji or be married by her would have a limitless future. Entering the Meizong sect, capturing Li Mu, and marrying Huanji were the three highest ideals of the demons of Thousand Fox Country. Li Mu stood behind Huanji and said, the crown prince likes Lord Huanji. Huanji said indifferently, the line of people who like me can stretch from here to the divine capital. Bai Xian is not one of them. I heard from Hu Jiu that you also like me. Hu Jiu did not disappoint Li Mu. As long as he told Hu Jiu a secret, it was the same as telling everyone. Li Mu said honestly, the first time I saw Lord Huanji, I fell in love with you. I have liked you for a long time. If other girls heard this, they might panic. However, Huanji had experienced this countless times. Even her tone did not change at all. She said, you are too weak. I will not like a man who is weaker than me. Li Mu did not know what was wrong with her. If the Empress also thought this way, she would probably be lonely for the rest of her life. Although he was complaining in his heart, his expression became firm. He said, I will work hard to cultivate. Huanji shook her head. She could not bear to hurt him anymore. After all, she had bullied him enough. She had to give him some hope. At this moment, Li Mu asked again, Lord Huanji, what kind of contribution do I need to make to be able to comprehend the heavenly book? Huanji asked casually, why do you need to comprehend the heavenly book? Li Mu said, I heard that the heavenly book contains the laws of heaven and earth. Those who comprehend the heavenly book can comprehend the laws of heaven and earth and become stronger. Huanji did not expect him to be so determined to become stronger. She smiled and said, you don't need to make any contributions. Follow me for 5 years. After 5 years, I will ask my father to make an exception and let you comprehend the heavenly book once. Li Mu shook his head. 5 years is too long. I have no chance. Huanji leaned comfortably on the chair and said, then there is no other way. Unless you can subdue the wolf clan or capture Li Mu alive in front of me. Or you can bring the heads of the top 10 heretical cultivation here. After a while, Li Mu found Hu Jio and asked, where are the top 10 heretical cultivation? Hu Jio asked in confusion, why do you ask this? Li Mu said, tell me first. Hu Jio explained, the top 10 heretical cultivation are the 10 hangers-on of the Zheojiang Commandery Prince. They are all evil people. Their hands are stained with the blood of the demon clan. The Meizong sect has tried to assassinate them many times, but they are not weak and very cunning. They are also protected by the Great Joe Court. He will die there. No, little snake is so beautiful. He might die there. Why does he have to comprehend the heavenly book? Huanji didn't know how to describe her current feelings. She knew why Li Mu had to comprehend the heavenly book. He wanted to become stronger because of what she said. Just because she said that she didn't like men who were weaker than her, he risked his life for the chance to become stronger. Huanji's heart was very complicated. She gritted her teeth and said, "This idiot. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.